Chapter 1101. Hua Sungzan sat with his legs crossed. Li Qingshan stood behind him, pressing his hands against his shoulders. The figures of the spirit turtle and the phoenix alternated, sometimes silent and profound, sometimes resplendent, illuminating the back of Great Buddha Mountain. Hua Sungzan suddenly felt like he had sunk into the depths of the sea. His mind was extremely peaceful, avoiding all pain and disaster. The lingering influence of the demonic seed had become diluted and indifferent in the long passage of time. Suddenly, he soared into the sky, straight into the clouds, filled with the desire for eternal life. An incomparably hot but harmless fire rose from his heart. As the blood flowed through his body, all kinds of injuries were healed. The unraging monk, Gu Yenying, and Duoj watched on in the surroundings. They were all amazed inside. Li Qingshan's eyes were as deep and silent as the depths of the sea. His bearing was noble and unapproachable, as if he had become a different person, or, in other words, a god. The phoenix and the spirit turtle were all natural gods, completely dispelling the mundane world. They presented a life form that completely differed from regular humans and demons. If it weren't for the disturbance from the deep demonic consciousness, this is what he should be like, the unraging monk side inside. For the first time in his life, he felt that having some demonic consciousness was not a bad thing. At the very least, it would make him seem a little more human. Although all cultivators pursued the inhuman for their entire lives, they could not help but feel reluctant to part with the word human before they truly became immortals or Buddhas. Gradually, the silent water and scorching fire merged together. As Li Qingshan treated Hua Sungzan's wounds, he also practiced his various powers. The spirit turtle's method of sea suppression had the wondrous effect of stabilizing the soul, but if he only used this power, Hua Sungzan's emotions would definitely change drastically. He might even become lost in the deep sea forever, just like how the power of ruins end affected Gongyuan. As a result, he used the phoenix's scripture of Nerva to neutralize it, stimulating his rising passion, so that he could break free from the deep sea and heal his wounds at the same time. Just like that, 3 days and 3 nights passed. Li Qingshan exhaled and pulled back his hands. He completely familiarized himself with the brand new power, establishing a foundation for breaking through to the 5th layer of the phoenix's scripture of Nerva. Hua Sungzan slowly opened his eyes as well. At first, he was rather lost, as if he had split into two. One was sleeping in the deep sea, while the other was soaring through the sky. Only after quite a while did the two perspectives gradually overlap, returning to the vision of Hua Sungzan. However, he gained a brand new understanding of the world. Although his cultivation did not recover immediately, his mind became calm and clear, and his body was full of vitality. With this as the foundation, recovering his cultivation was only a matter of time, and he would be able to reach the next level. Influenced by the divine attributes of the phoenix and the spirit turtle, he possessed an otherworldly bearing despite his extraordinary handsomeness in the first place. He could tempt any woman, but she was still an exception. Little Hua, how? Gu Yenying Hua Tian. Him. How can I be wrong if I make a move? However, Li Qingshan was still rather surprised by Hua Sungzan's changes. After all, although the divine surnames of the phoenix and the spirit turtle contradicted each other, they were still divine surnames after all. There was no ox demon or tiger demon to balance them out. I've never felt so good. Qingshan, your world is even more fascinating than I imagined. Hua Sungzan turned around and smiled. Actually, this isn't the most fascinating part. Li Qingshan relaxed and snickered. His expression had already returned to normal. His eyes were black and bright, but they did not seem deep. His bearing was no longer noble either. Is that so? Hua Sungzan was rather curious. However, It's best if you don't try the other part. Li Qingshan patted his shoulder. No matter how great the influence of the divine surname was, it could not be too bad. However, the demonic surname was different. Whether it was stubborn, or bloodthirsty, none of them were good words. Hua Sengzan bowed and thanked him. Li Qingshan held his arm. Speaking of which, I haven't had the time to thank you either. If you hadn't saved me back, then, even exposing your identity, I would have died a long time ago. What I said in the grand hall has already filled me with regret. If you refuse to accept it, I really won't be able to stop worrying. That's just the influence of the demonic seed. What's there to feel regret about? Li Qingshan was unconvinced. The growth of the demonic seed is also because of my evil thoughts. Hua Sengzan shook his head. Yeah, if you can think like that, then you're not afraid of falling into the demonic path again. A single thought of Buddhism and demonic demons. If you're an eminent monk of great virtue, your evil thoughts won't grow. Even if there's a demonic seed in your heart, it'll gradually wither away. I can see that you're very intelligent. So why don't you shave your hair and become a monk? You can join my Chan monastery of Devanaga, the unraging monk suddenly said. This. Hua Sengzan was mildly surprised. Thank you for your favor, unraging master, but I've already embarked on the path of the sword, so I'll pass. Oh, right, speaking of the path of the sword, I'll pass this to you too. Li Qingshan pressed his hand against Hua Sengzan's head and passed on the various variations of the sword scripture of heaven and earth to him. Only after quite a while did Hua Sengzan return to his senses from the various variations of the sword style, but he still felt like his head was splitting. He smiled bitterly. Can't you at least give me some time to prepare myself? Ha! Who's afraid of choking when eating delicacies? As for your cultivation, I think it's best if you recover it yourself. Of course. Can you send me off again? Where? The Clear River Prefecture. Now's not a good time. The soaring locust king has gathered all the insects there. It's a frightening sight. At this moment, Li Qingshan watched over the Clear River Prefecture with his clone, protecting Ru Xian as she continued to spread the plague among the insects. However, it was not as effective as it was against regular locusts. Under the control of a powerful demon chi, the swarm of insects that blotted out the sky gathered as a single entity. They were like dark clouds that never dispersed all year round, producing a rhythmic sound that was deafening like endless rolling thunder. Under the effects of the plague, tens of thousands of locusts died at every single moment. Even they constantly devoured one another to maintain their existence. However, compared to their colossal numbers, it was not a loss at all. Even Li Qingshan, who had been used to seeing large things, felt slightly shocked. He frowned over the soaring Locust King's determination. It's exactly because of this that I have to go back. All of my family is there. Oh, right, Qiongji, she's still waiting for you. I know. It's time for me to go back. Li Qingshan nodded. Qingshan, it's all up to you, the unraging monk said. Leave it to me. Li Qingshan said confidently. Master, you have to be careful too. The soaring locust king's hatred for you is probably no less than the golden cicada spirit king's. Perhaps he's already colluding with the demon domain in an attempt to destroy the demon suppression hall. Putting on such a great show of force regardless of the price might just be a diversion. The great master of the School of Agriculture's whereabouts are still unknown right now. This is rather strange, Gu Yenying said. Thank you for your warning, Commander Gu. I have the same concerns as well, so I've already reported it to Senior Brother the Abbot. Before everything settles down, I will never take a single step away from Great Buddha Mountain. If the soaring Locust King is bold enough to come alone, he won't be able to do much either. The three of them bid farewell to the unraging monk, Li Qingshan, and Hua Sungzan hurried off to the Clear River Prefecture, while Gu Yenying returned to the waterside pavilion of Listening Wind. She had no intention of interfering with this battle. Li Qingshan arrived in Han Qiongji's dwelling, but he did not see any trace of Han Qiongji. All he saw was a letter on the table. Opening it, there was only a single sentence on the white paper. "You bastard Li Qingshan, I'm not going to wait anymore." Chapter 11:02. Li Qingshan raised his head slightly, and the tip of his nose twitched gently. The familiar fragrance filled his lungs, and an image formed from the smell appeared before him. It included his figure, except it was extremely faint. Vaguely, he saw her hesitate a few times in front of the table before writing down that sentence. Afterwards, she walked out the door and vanished into the dwelling, but she left behind a long trail of aura behind her. As a result, he smiled and pursued her. Han Qiongji stood on the top of the building, gripping the railing with both hands as she overlooked the entire Han estate. The clansmen were packing up their belongings. Even the most composed of them would be rather hurried. Not a single person who had personally witnessed the terrifying sight of the swarm of insects could remain fearless. Perhaps she could be considered an exception, but it was not because of courage. Instead, it was because her mind was occupied by a multitude of thoughts. The hot wind ruffled her red clothes. Time had already left some traces on her face, making her seem much more mature. Her eyes flickered with the light of wisdom, which made her entire bearing undergo a slight change. "Qiongji, it's time to set off." Han Anjuan's voice rang out from behind. "We really are weak." Han Qiongji sighed. The soaring Locust King gathered the swarm of insects, but it did not launch an attack. Instead, it scattered most of the insects into the underground caverns that were as dense as a spider's web. According to her knowledge, it was searching for the golden cicada spirit king's traces. However, the various clans were all preparing for a great migration. They were in a hurry to leave the Clear River Prefecture, like children frightened by shadows. The enemy is powerful, so we should take the initiative to retreat and conserve our strength. Han Anjuan paused. "We will return. We will become even stronger." I must have seemed very foolish back then. I knew we weren't on the same path, but I never thought our paths would be so different. Han Qiongji's hand. However, I don't regret it. General Han Qiongji leapt off the tall building. What does that have to do with her long hair drifted about as she landed gracefully on the ground. My Han family will draw a clear line between us, and even if I become stronger and return, let go. Things will remain the same, but return to her senses. The clansmen of the Han clan I've seen all gathered on the drill grounds. I don't agree to it. A soaring dragon ship was docked there. Han Qiongji's letter, Han Tie was currently organizing the boarding reducing of the ship. It to ashes. Han Anjuan and Han Qiongji what else do you arrived at the drill ground together. Said viciously. The clansmen stopped in their tracks, suddenly let go of her, and even the children who had just learned to walk gave a military salute. Han Qiongji patted Han Tie's shoulder and said with a smile, "Come to ask for your hand in marriage." You really have the bearing of a patriarch. His voice was powerful and resonant. Are you ready as well? Like a gust of wind Han Tie's face was still the drill ground, but his eyes were filled with concern. All the clansmen of the Han clan quiet down. Han Anjuan and Han Tie I don't need you to worry about me. Let's continue. They were both rather surprised before as soon as possible at Han Qiongji. The long night Han Qiongji was taken aback. What did you say? A voice came from the horizon. I've come to marry you. Han Qiongji's heart shook. I know everything you've done. She looked up and saw Han Qiongji stared into Li rapidly approaching. It tore through the air. Li Qingshan in the blink of an eye, the figure that she had yearned for day and night had arrived in front of her. That's looking at that familiar, if you don't smiling face. All I can do is kidnap you. She was momentarily speechless. What's the difference between that and kidnapping? Not only did this name come from Han Anjuan's mouth, I'm a powerful evildoer. It also appeared in the hearts of the clansmen can kill millions of people. This was a supreme prodigy woman I from love. The Clear River Prefecture. Qingshan, this was first young Miss Han's prospective son-in-law, lowered her head, and he had just demonstrated startling strength Let's
an
not
identity
delay the
on
migration.
Great Buddha Mountain.
Nothing will be
They
delayed.
could not help but
Li
discuss
Qingshan
him.
said to Han Anjuan, "Father-in-law Han, please prepare for our wedding." He then said to the clansmen of the Han clan below, "Please stay behind and be witnesses for the wedding. If I don't agree, who's going to marry you?" Han Qiongji said. However, without waiting for Li Qingshan to speak, Han Anjuan said to Han Tie, "Cancel the plan, settle down the clansmen, and prepare for the wedding." "Yes, father." Han Tie accepted the order. Han Qiongji was shocked. Han Anjuan was adamant in opposing the wedding. Now, he would not yield to force. "Since there's no regret, what are you afraid of?" Han Anjuan said. Han Qiongji was speechless. All along, the person who looked forward to this wedding the most was her. Until now, it was still the same. Thousands of miles away, Elder Tian stood on top of the hidden sword peak, looking down at the blue mountains that were like the sea. He felt a sense of joy as if the entire world was in his hands. After several days of negotiations, he smiled. There was finally a result. The complete hidden sword manual of heaven and earth appeared in his mind. This was something that the previous palace masters could not do. They could only go to the hidden sword court or the sword catacomb to comprehend it themselves. And he obtained it from the hidden sword peak. At the end of the day, it was just a sword. No matter how powerful it was, it needed a person to wield it. He waved his sleeves and stretched out his fingers, covering the hidden sword peak. "Now, tell me your name." "My name is Abandoned Xian." A cold voice came from the hidden sword peak, but it contained a deep and perverse aura. If Li Qingshan heard it, he would immediately recognize it. This was the voice he had heard through the soul-shifting sword. "Abandoned Xian, a good name. You really were sealed in the sword catacomb by the 5 absolutes immortal." Elder Tian smiled, his heart burning. This was the #1 treasure in the sword catacomb, the sword of the 5 absolutes immortal. Even the 10 famed swords added together could not compare to this Abandoned Xian. "If it wasn't for that old man's seal, you wouldn't have been able to trap me. Cut the crap. Hurry up and cut the chains of heaven and earth." "There's no hurry. We agreed that when I become the owner of the Abandoned Xian sword, I will naturally let you out. Follow me and rule the world. It's better than being trapped here," Elder Tian said. He liked risks, but it did not mean that he did not know how to avoid them. "Then come, my master." Chapter 1103. Golden Cicada, come out. Golden Cicada, do you know how many people I've eaten? Where's your merciful heart? Where's your repentance? Come out. In the pitch-black underground cave, the swarm of locusts whizzed past, setting off a mournful howl. It was like a gale on an icy plain. Regardless of whether there was a response, they roared day and night, stirring up the deepest darkness. Buzz. The swarm of locusts poured into a cave like a tide. The sea of blue butterfly flowers that had bloomed in the darkness for thousands of years were all dim and withered, completely devoured. Only a lonely stone platform was left in the middle. After a while, the buzzing sound faded away, and two figures drilled out from under the stone platform. Phew, they're finally gone. These locusts seem to have gone crazy. Little Phoenix, Li Fengyuan, let out a breath. Only now did he feel the pain in his arm. The tiger girl, who was even more petite than him, was fiercely biting and letting out a low, angry roar. Her pair of tiger ears were all erect. Smelly girl, have you bitten enough? How many times have I said that I'm your brother? Although we're not blood-related, we're closer than blood-related. If it weren't for me, you would have already been eaten by the locusts. You're still biting. Li Fengyuan waved his arm, trying to throw her off, but he didn't dare to use too much strength for fear of hurting her. Suddenly, he heard a slight flapping sound. A locust flew down from the stone pillar at the top of the cave, staring at them with a pair of cold compound eyes. With a flash of a blade, Li Fengyuan waved, "Tiger Feng," and cut this flying locust in half. At this time, a deafening buzzing sound came from the depths of the cave. "Oh no, we have to leave this place quickly." His figure turned, and flames soared all over his body. It illuminated the pitch-black cave and turned into pieces of gorgeous wings, revealing the shape of a phoenix. Grabbing the tiger girl with both claws, it flew away. A stream of brilliant light and overflowing flames sped through the dark cave. Buzzing sounds came from all directions, gradually closing in on them. Suddenly, the road ahead was blocked by a strange yellow face. It was formed by countless locusts, and its mouth opened and closed. It let out a hoarse voice. "It's actually a phoenix. It looks delicious. Hurry up and come over. Let me have a taste of you." It suddenly opened its mouth wide and pounced over. "Taste your mother." Li Fengyuan steeled his heart and let out a resonant phoenix cry. He rammed his head into the strange yellow face. There was a loud bang. The monstrous face collapsed. Countless flying locusts scattered and turned into ashes in the flames, but more locusts swarmed up. It was as if he had sunk into a swamp. Everything he saw, heard, and sensed was endless locusts. This was not a simple gathering of a large number of locusts, but a closely related whole. The power of billions of locusts stacked on top of each other, causing a terrifying qualitative change. Li Fengyuan couldn't move an inch, and the flames on his body gradually weakened. He tightly protected the tiger girl in his arms, but he heard the hoarse voice say, "So hot! It's hot!" This was not a cry of pain. It was more like a gluttonous diner tasting a scalding hot delicacy, chewing it carefully and eagerly. "Ah, give me back my saber." The tigress girl struggled with all her might. "You want to use it to cut me again. Ouch." Li Fengyuan felt an extremely slight pain on his arm. A flying locust broke through the barrier of flames and ruthlessly bit him. Although it immediately turned into ashes, he felt a fatal threat. He thought, "Looks like I have no choice but to ask for help." He took out the jade talisman given by Li Qingshan and forcefully crushed it. Pa! A thunderous crack tore apart countless flying locusts. "So fast," Li Fengyuan said in surprise. A long black whip that resembled a poisonous dragon passed through the swarm of insects and wrapped around them. It pulled back, but the swarm tightly wrapped around them and refused to let go. the tiger girl snatched the tiger fang and forcefully slashed forward. A half-moon-shaped bloody light whizzed out and broke through the layers of swarm. Li Fengyuan also flapped his wings with all his might. His vision suddenly widened. The other end of the long whip was in the hands of a silver-colored woman. She was tall and graceful, but her expression was extremely cold. "Mother!" The tiger girl blurted out. "So it's not father, it's mother. Whatever, I'll lend you a hand." Li Fengyuan threw a fiery red parasol fruit into his mouth, and the flames on his body reignited. Helicoverpa Rosa glanced at him and waved the long whip with all her might. After the tiger girl swung the knife, her face turned pale. The madness in her eyes became more and more intense. Just when she was about to swing the knife a second time, it was snatched away by Helicoverpa Rosa. Li Fengyuan's strength was comparable to that of a demon king. After joining forces with the powerful carapaced demon king Helicoverpa Rosa, they barely resisted the fierce attacks of the swarm of insects. However, it was difficult for them to break out of the encirclement. Under the siege of the swarm of insects, they almost didn't dare to use any of their supernatural powers. Once their demonic qi was exhausted, they would be completely devoured. The swarm of insects seemed to be endless, and they gradually fell into a desperate situation. Why isn't father here yet? Li Fengyuan was anxious, but at the moment of life and death, he stimulated the hidden power in his body bit by bit. Shock of the ox demon. At the moment of life and death, an incomparably calm voice suddenly came from the top of the cave through the layers of soil and stones, followed by a loud bang. Boom! The solid and heavy soil and stones shook and split, collapsing and pouring down, burying them together with the swarm of insects. Earth force field. Father! Li Fengyuan's heart was filled with joy. Suddenly, he felt his body become light, and the soil and stones around him flew up together. Bright sunlight rushed into his eyes, and in the blink of an eye, he had already left the underground cave. He saw the scenery on the ground, and the figure standing in the sky. "Father, you're too slow," Li Fengyuan shouted. "I've been here for a long time. Otherwise, do you think you can play hide and seek for so long?" Li Qingshan's mirror image had been wandering in the underground cave, secretly casting its supernatural powers several times to help Li Fengyuan and the tiger girl avoid the detection of the soaring Locust King. Then why didn't you make a move earlier? If I had made a move earlier, you wouldn't have had the chance to show off. Li Qingshan stared at the cylindrical hole below. The swarm of insects did not chase after them, but instead scattered back into the underground cave. He thought to himself, "How patient! This is too much patience." These days, he had been looking for the soaring Locust King's main body. Otherwise, in such a vast underground cave, it would take too much effort to kill all the locusts, and it would be difficult to complete before the golden cicada spirit king ascended. As long as the main body of the soaring Locust King appeared, the Han residence was less than 1,000 miles away, and his main body would be able to arrive in an instant to execute the decapitation plan. However, the cautiousness of the soaring Locust King exceeded his expectations. Even with so many insects surrounding them, the main body did not appear, and not even a trace of its aura was leaked. But thinking about it, it was to be expected. Although the Golden Cicada Spirit King was focused on cultivation and preparing for ascension, it was not absolutely impossible for him to make a move. Once the main body of the soaring Locust King appeared, it might not be the opponent of the Golden Cicada Spirit King, and with his help, the soaring Locust King would definitely lose. Only when the Golden Cicada Spirit King underwent his tribulation, with the help of the power of the tribulation, would he have a chance to take revenge. Chapter 1104. The Han estate was decorated with lanterns and streamers. It was bustling and noisy. The gloom from the past few days seemed to disperse slightly, as if it had returned to several decades ago, when the world was at peace. The school of the military did not have so many unnecessary formalities. Li Qingshan changed into a new set of clothes and stood at the entrance with Han Tie, welcoming the guests. There were many familiar faces among them, as well as blurry or people he did not recognize at all. When they arrived before him, they all became a little more careful, saying cautiously, "Congratulations." Li Qingshan received them all with a smile. His smile was not fake at all. Instead, it was joy from the bottom of his heart, which made him seem even more approachable than Han Tie on the side. As a result, the people who had interacted with him in the past could not help but stop worrying. They immediately became more enthusiastic. However, many people who had never interacted with him struggled to believe that he was the shrewd demon king of the North Moon who had fooled everyone in the world. During this period of time, the reason for the battle on Great Buddha Mountain spread. The violent, bloodthirsty demon king had become the hero who had saved the Green Province in the blink of an eye. People could not help but find the matters of the world unpredictable. Some of them even doubted it. After all, that was the Sword Collection Palace. However, the Sword Collection Palace never responded to all of this, basically tacitly acknowledging the fact that they were colluding with the demon domain, which made people sigh. It was all thanks to this, or probably not a lot of guests would be bold enough to pay a visit. It was even more terrifying than facing the soaring Locust King himself. The Locust Plague was widespread, but they mainly slaughtered mortals. Even though a few cultivators had died in battle, not a single great cultivator had died to the insects. None of the great cultivators who had died on Great Buddha Mountain were nameless. Hua Sengzan and Hua Qinglu arrived together. He clasped his hands. "Qingshan, congratulations." "Qingzan, I heard that the Hua family has relocated. I thought you wouldn't be coming. How can I not come to your wedding? Not to mention, there's no safer place in the entire Green Province than here." Hua Sengzan smiled. He had yet to recover his cultivation, but his bearing seemed even more graceful and composed. However, Hua Qinglu's expression became rather mixed. Li Qingshan blinked at her. "What's wrong? Don't you recognize me?" Hua Qinglu felt a sense of familiarity. He was still the same person. It was just that he was more high-spirited than before. He smiled bitterly and said, "Brother Li, you really know how to lie. And Big Brother, to think that I called you Big Brother. How dare you hide it from me for so many years?" Li Qingshan and Hua Sengzan looked at each other and smiled. Li Qingshan pretended to be serious and said, "How can you say that I'm lying? Li Qingshan has always been sincere to you. You still dare to speak." Hua Qinglu called out. Han Tie coughed heavily. Li Qingshan chuckled. All right, hurry up and go in. There are more people coming from behind." Hua Qinglu stepped through the door and turned around again. "Brother Li, I really am happy for you and Sister Han." Li Qingshan nodded. Hua Qinglu gazed at the side of his angular face and thought about how he protected her behind him when they first met. She suddenly felt a sliver of melancholy, but it was only melancholy. She was no longer the little girl from back then. 2 streaks of light descended from the sky. Yu Wuyang and Jin Fugue arrived at the entrance. They looked at the happy Li Qingshan with different expressions. Their intelligence was much better than regular cultivators. The Sword Collection Palace's collusion with the demon domain in an attempt to destroy the demon suppression hall was basically certain now, but they found it to be much more absurd than regular cultivators. This was originally an irresolvable grievance, but right now they were in no position to criticize Li Qingshan for the massacre. Instead, they blamed themselves for failing to recognize him. "Fellow cultivators, I didn't think we'd meet again so soon," said Li Qingshan. "Yeah, I really didn't." Jean Fugui sighed. Wu Yong furrowed his brows and said nothing, as if he was thinking about an extremely difficult problem. "Great General Yu, we'll be relying on you for today's ceremony." Li Qingshan smiled. As Han Qiongji's master and a great general king, Yu Wuyong was the most suitable person to host the wedding. He did not say anything else, only responding with a grunt. However, his arrival had already expressed his attitude. After all, Li Qingshan had shown mercy on Great Buddha Mountain. This was undeniable. The sun rose into the sky, and the guests all gathered together. They gradually relaxed, temporarily escaping from the soaring Locust King's shadow and seeking the protection of an even more powerful demon king. Just like Hua Sengzan had said, there was no safer place in the Green Province than here. For a moment, there was a hubbub of voices. Li Qingshan glanced past the familiar faces one by one. Gu Yenying, Lu Chongqing, Lu Chuanfeng, Sun Fubai, Hao Pingyang. Various memories of him in the Clear River Prefecture flashed through his mind. His emotions fluctuated slightly, but he simply smiled. Suddenly, he sensed a familiar aura approach him, and he raised an eyebrow. A woman walked in. Her long dress trailed behind her, and she was dressed splendidly. Apart from her supreme beauty, she also gave off an extraordinary, strange charm. As she looked around, she was graceful, attracting everyone's attention. She stood in the center of the hall, silently, staring straight at Li Qingshan. The hall immediately fell silent. Everyone in the Clear River Prefecture knew her name. Apart from her cultivation and charm, it was also because of her unclear relationship with the North Moon in the past, who was also the main character of today's wedding, Li Qingshan. Everyone's gazes moved back and forth between the two of them. Han Anjuan closed his eyes and sat there without moving, while Gu Yenying touched her lips and smiled silently. Hua Sengzan sighed inside and glanced at Hua Chunlu. However, there was no one else in Begonia's eyes. There was only Li Qingshan. She did not even blink. Haitang. Li Qingshan felt even more troublesome than facing the encirclement of a group of great cultivators when faced with her resentful gaze. Peach blossoms with human faces. A prophecy has come true. This is the will of the heavens. What more can I say? Begonia's mournful voice echoed through the quiet hall, but she did not rebuke him, nor did she make any requests. She turned around and left. The will of the heavens. Li Qingshan suddenly smiled. He did not take it seriously. Begonia shuddered and looked back. All she saw was his firm and composed smile, without the slightest hint of regret. She could not help but grit her teeth secretly. This guy, even now, he's still... Scorching heat rose up in her heart, perhaps due to anger or something else. A smear of red appeared on her pale face, but her desolation was completely swept away. She made up her mind and took off into the air. "Humph, North Moon, just you wait. I'll make you understand my power sooner or later." Everyone who should be here is here. Li Qingshan shrugged and said to Gu Yening in the crowd, Commander Gu, you're smiling so happily. Do you want to say something too? Do you really want me to say something? Gu Yening was intrigued. Her smile was rather mischievous. Then I'll really say something. All right, forget it. Chapter 1105. The Myriad Ghosts Abyss. A Sarira melted at the tip of her pale finger, shining with faint, golden light. It merged with her palm strand by strand like a golden thread, sinking into her white bones and turning into her bone marrow, circulating through her body. The wind passed through the chasm and the profounding ghost gathering formation, immediately turning into surging, chilly winds, whistling like the wails of thousands of ghosts. The long banner fluttered violently, Little and stood up and gazed at it. A crescent moon hung in the sky, as if she was submerged in a pitch-black river. The chilly winds were the river water, and the chasm was the riverbank. The moonlight was dim and unclear. She took out an object that resembled a sharp awl. It was ghastly white, like an arcane artifact made of white bones. It seemed like countless ghouls were devouring and embracing one another. Although it did not glow, it seemed to possess a sharpness that could pierce through domains and the power to distort space. This was the key to the gate of hungry ghosts. With this key of hungry ghosts, she could use the gate of hungry ghosts with great ease, preventing all those who viewed her as an enemy of Buddha from acting recklessly for fear of harming her. The Dark Queen had given it to her. After learning that her death was a scheme of the Umbraline sect, she believed her without any doubt. Chu, like king, let out a long sigh. Xianhua, take care. He left by himself. Thinking back to everything back then, she could not help but sigh gloomily. She was very much like a mortal with emotions. She refined the many sariras she had obtained from Great Buddha Mountain, injecting new power into the path of white bone and great beauty. However, unavoidably, the intense clash between the thoughts of Buddhism and demonic fostered a human heart. It began to feel many things and react emotionally to many matters. For example, Li Qingshan was about to get married. She did not care about these empty formalities, nor did she envy Han Qiongji. She was even less worried that Li Qingshan would be tied down by love. However, she just felt that it was rather strange. She could not help but shake her head, purging her thoughts and preparing for the next step of cultivation. She obviously would not be going to the wedding, just in case she stole the bride's limelight. She would go to the Clear River Prefecture after she killed the soaring Locust King. Now that the profound Yin ghost gathering formation had been reactivated, the Blood Sea banner and the skull prayer beads had been completely repaired, and the Buddha slaying sword had undergone another round of refinement. Her cultivation of the path of white bone and great beauty had advanced as well. It could be said that everything was ready and only needed to open the gate of hungry ghosts. However, before that, she needed to refine a new white bone treasure, the chaotic soul bell. Thousands of miles of yellow sand. A lonely city. The sandstorm swept across. It covered the stars and the moon. This was the border between the Azure Province and the Scarlet Province. Storms raged on endlessly all year round, sometimes even causing astral winds in the sky to turn into terrifying tornadoes. It sucked in the sand like a yellow dragon, destroying everything in its path. Only powerful cultivators could survive here. This isolated city was where the Sandboat sect was located. The Sandboat sect leader had gone through the second heavenly tribulation and condensed a gold core with the help of the white camel technique. He was quite famous in the Red Prefecture. However, at this moment, the Sandboat sect was silent. The disciples were nowhere to be seen. The great formation that had protected the sect for thousands of years had been broken. Camels carved from white stones were silently being battered by the sandstorm. Shrill cries rang out from the violent sand hall. Those were not human cries. Deep blue willow, the wisps flickered within the wide-open gate. All of the disciples had gathered in the hall, but they had all been turned into withered corpses. Their souls were being tormented in the willow, the wisps. The sandboat sect leader was among them as well. He cursed viciously. "There's no enmity between us, yet you actually did this. You'll die a horrible death." "Ha, enmity? Isn't there one now?" Elder Ming sneered. It had been many years since he had seen something like this. As the great elder of the Umbral Een sect, the Gate of Hungry Ghosts had an endless supply of ghosts. There was no need for him to do something as heinous as sacrificing living souls. However, he had nothing to worry about now. As he watched the souls wailing in the flames, a twisted sense of pleasure rose in his heart. However, he recalled the white fire in the ghost abyss and felt a chill run down his spine. He urged the willow, the wisps even harder. However, he was not doing this to vent his anger or to cultivate. As the wailing grew louder and the willow, the wisps grew stronger, he solemnly took out a black memorial tablet and walked to the altar in the hall. Behind the heavy yellow curtains stood the statue of an old man. His face was full of wrinkles and ravines. His unkempt beard and hair were all white. He was hunched over and held a poplar walking stick as he stared blankly ahead. That gaze inexplicably made Elder Ming feel disgusted. It must be the first sect leader of the Sandboat sect. Now that his entire sect had been annihilated, he did not care about a statue at all. With a wave of his sleeve, the statue flew out and crashed into the wall, shattering into pieces. Then he respectfully placed the black memorial tablet in his hand onto it. There was a row of small golden words written on it: "Third sect leader of the Umbral Een sect, Li Musi." Before the successive sect leaders and great elders of the Umbral Een sect entered the hungry ghost realm, no matter if they ascended or turned into a ghost, they would leave behind such a memorial tablet. There was a bit of spirituality stored in it, and it was kept in the ancestral spirit hall of the Umbral Een sect. Elder Ming was responsible for guarding the ancestral spirit hall. When needed, he was responsible for presiding over the ceremony, sacrificing living souls, and summoning the ancestral spirits. However, the spirituality of most of the memorial tablets would be extinguished very quickly. Some would even be extinguished after just a few days of worship. These great cultivators who ran amok in the 9 provinces could not escape the fate of being devoured in the hungry ghost realm. It was truly frightening. Therefore, unless it was absolutely necessary, Elder Ming would never enter the hungry ghost realm. If he wanted to enter, he would use the method of ascending to enter, just like this Li Musi. The howling of the sandstorm became louder and louder. Elder Ming straightened his expression and knelt down to pay his respects. He muttered an incantation, which cleverly merged with the wailing of the souls, gradually repelling the sound of the sandstorm outside the hall. Then he sent living souls into the memorial tablets one after another. Suddenly, an even darker shadow rose from the black memorial tablets. It was distorted like a person, yet not a person. In an instant, it filled the entire hall. Disciple greets sect leader. Elder Ming kowtowed deeply, feeling a bone-deep chill. "What did you call me for? Did you find that white-bone successor?" The voice seemed to come from the depths of the cave, echoing in the darkness. Disciple was just about to report this matter. Elder Ming narrated everything that happened in the Xianin sect in full detail. He pushed all the responsibility to the dead Xianin sect leader, saying that he was tricked by the white-bone successor, which led to the destruction of the sect. The black shadow was silent for a moment, as if it did not expect such an unforeseen event. It suddenly approached Elder Ming and said eerily, "So you escaped by yourself? Why didn't you open the hungry ghost gate?" "I did it to report this matter to you. That white flame is no small matter. 1,000,000 ghost soldiers were ignited in an instant, and even dozens of ghost kings were not its match. If I opened the hungry ghost gate rashly, I'm afraid it would provide her with food, which would be even more difficult to deal with. Elder Ming lowered his body even more. I know you're afraid of death, but I forgive you. When we reach the hungry ghost realm, I'll reward you. If your soul hasn't been destroyed. Long time no see. Old hunchback, you're not dead yet. The black shadow withdrew back into the memorial tablet, and its voice gradually became faintly discernible. It contained malicious mockery, but the last sentence was not said to Elder Ming. Elder Ming was stunned, and suddenly turned his head. A hunchbacked old man was standing outside the door with a cane, his eyes staring blankly ahead. If it was not for the faintly discernible demonic aura, he would almost suspect that this was still a statue. You are. A name suddenly appeared in Elder Ming's mind. White Camel Sand King. One of the 10 demon kings, the king of the Scarlet Province's demon race. Unlike the Banyan Tree King and the Dragon King of the Sea, who stayed in a stable place, the White Camel Sand King roamed the Scarlet Province's vast sea of sand all year round. His whereabouts were a mystery, and very few people had seen him. Legend had it that he would transform into a white camel and guide the lost in the sandstorm. He would even guide the sandstorm to avoid the oases where living beings gathered. He was regarded as an auspicious symbol, and there were even fewer people who had seen his human form. Elder Ming had only heard of the name White Camel Sand King. Without hesitation, he transformed into layers of ghostly shadows and flew away. All the ghost kings in his hands had been lost in the battle with the Xianin sect, and he was in his weakest state. Besides, even if his strength was undamaged, it would be difficult for him to contend against the 10 demon kings, but he was still confident that he could escape. The White Camel Sand King did not move. He lightly tapped the poplar cane in his hand, and the sandstorm instantly became 10 times stronger, 100 times stronger, sweeping thousands of miles and devouring everything. On the other side of the hungry ghost gate, boundless black shadows descended. Countless corpse kings and ghost kings prostrated themselves on the ground, and there were even a few corpse emperors and ghost emperors among them. They all retracted their aura and went forward, shouting, "Welcome, Emperor Li." Chapter 1106. With Yu Wuyang's voice, Han Qiongji strode out from the back of the hall. She didn't look shy at all. She was not wearing a phoenix coronet, but a military uniform with a fiery red soft armor on the outside. She was holding a 3-foot-long saber in her hand. She looked so heroic that she didn't look like a bride attending a wedding, but more like a soldier about to set foot on the battlefield. She opened her arms and asked Li Qingshan, "What do you think?" "Beautiful," Li Qingshan said sincerely. "What about Sect Master Qiu?" Han Qiongji asked again. "Beautiful," Li Qingshan insisted. He couldn't hesitate at this time. "What about Commander Gu?" Han Qiongji smiled at Gu Yenying, and Gu Yenying also smiled back. "Beautiful," Li Qingshan rolled his eyes. "What about Ru Xian?" Han Qiongji continued to ask. "Beautiful," Li Qingshan agreed. He didn't know if he should be happy that Ru Xian didn't come to the wedding. "What about Little?" And Han Qiongji thought for a while and asked again. "She counts as well?" Li Qingshan was surprised. "What do you think?" Han Qiongji didn't give up. The crowd burst into laughter. Although cultivators didn't care about etiquette, it was rare to see such a scene. Li Qingshan also smiled helplessly. "You are the most beautiful today. You are playing tricks." Han Qiongji blushed, and Li Qingshan felt a surge of warmth in his chest. He couldn't help but take her hand. "Master." Han Qiongji nodded to Yu Wuyang. Yu Wuyang's expression didn't change, and he didn't say a word. "First bow to heaven and earth. Li Qingshan straightened his face and bowed. Cultivators also needed to respect heaven and earth. Only by stepping on the earth could they reach the ninth heaven. Second, bow to your parents. Li Qingshan bowed deeply in the direction of the crouching ox village again. That was the place he had sworn he would never return to, and it was also the place that often made him think about it. It was the origin of everything. Bow to each other. The two of them turned around and looked at each other. Memories of the past appeared in their minds. The various feelings in their hearts were difficult to distinguish. They were both enveloped in joy and were about to bow down. Boom! Thunder suddenly boomed. The distant voice seemed to come from another world. It was already very light, but it was still enough to shake people's hearts. It was like the first sound of heaven and earth, destroying everything and giving birth to everything. Tribulation thunder. Li Qingshan suddenly turned around. This was a sound he had never heard before. Ascension, heavenly tribulation. Yu Wuyang immediately abandoned his responsibility as the wedding host. With one step, he reached the door. He looked in the direction of the thunder. The other cultivators followed suit. Even Han Anjuan, who was sitting in the seat of honor, was no exception. Ascension, looking at the whole 9 regions, there was nothing more rare and important than this. In the blink of an eye, the hall was empty. Only Li Qingshan and Han Qiongji were left, looking at each other. Golden Cicada really knows how to pick the right time. All right, let's bow to each other. There's no hurry. Li Qingshan bowed to Han Qiongji and straightened up, only to see Han Qiongji looking at him with a strange expression. She asked strangely, "Why don't you bow?" Han Qiongji burst into laughter. She laughed so hard that she covered her stomach with one hand and held Li Qingshan's shoulder with the other. "What are you laughing at?" Li Qingshan was confused. He felt the ground under his feet was also shaking slightly. The golden cicada spirit king had already begun to ascend. "I'm laughing at you." Han Qiongji was all smiles. "What's so funny about me?" Li Qingshan kept a straight face. Another thunder boomed from afar, as if it was urging him. "I'm laughing at you for pretending to be a human." "What are you talking about?" "Sigh, marriage is not as interesting as I thought it would be. However, you have fulfilled your promise." Han Qiongji patted Li Qingshan's shoulder, expressing her satisfaction. "It's not just a promise. It's not even fulfilled. All right, quick, bow for the last time." Li Qingshan urged. "I'm already satisfied. Besides, I suddenly don't want to be your wife anymore." Han Qiongji said. Although I'm not the most beautiful woman, don't think that your charm is that strong. I'm going back on my word. I'm going to break off the engagement." Han Qiongji announced loudly. Everyone outside the door turned around in surprise. They didn't understand what was going on. Some of them were worried that Li Qingshan would go crazy and were ready to slip away. Han Anjuan looked relieved. Gu Yenying smiled faintly, and Hua Sengzan sighed in his heart. "Qiongji, Qiongji." "Qiongji." Li Qingshan frowned slightly and held Han Qiongji's hand tightly. At the same time, thunder boomed, as if it was urging him. "Don't look like that. Smile." Han Qiongji leaned her head on Li Qingshan's chest, and tears welled up in her eyes. Li Qingshan closed his eyes and opened them again. "All right, I understand." However, when he let go of her hand, Han Qiongji suddenly grabbed his hand and said, "Be careful." Then she slowly let go of his hand. Li Qingshan took a step back and looked at her deeply, imprinting her image in his heart. Then he turned around, spread his wings, and flew away. Gu Yenying, Jin Fuguwei, and Yu Wuyang followed closely behind him. Han Qiongji watched them disappear into the sky and said to the crowd, "I'm sorry that you came here for nothing, but I won't return the gifts. Don't worry, there won't be a second time. The crowd looked at each other and didn't know what to say. Han Anjuan said, "You did well. I'm going to cultivate." Han Qiongji grinned and wanted to smile, but she looked sad. She walked out of the hall and returned to the attic. She looked at the sky and said in her heart, "Although it's just an empty title, once the marriage is signed, it will be a shackle for both of us. It's not what you like, and it's not what I want. Go, go, go where you want to go, do what you want to do." Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, and thunder flashed. The thunder boomed louder and louder, and it was getting closer and closer. Li Qingshan spread his wings and flew as fast as he could. In the blink of an eye, he had arrived in front of the clouds. The tribulation clouds covered the sky, forming many rings covering thousands of miles. Thunder and lightning were brewing in the clouds, emitting terrifying power. But this was just the beginning. Below the center of the tribulation clouds, there was a mountain that was thousands of meters tall. Thunder and lightning were striking the top of the mountain. Instead of saying it was thunder and lightning, it was more accurate to say that the thunder and lightning were unintentionally released by the tribulation clouds. The thunder and lightning easily cut off tens of thousands of tons of rocks, but the mountain was still rising, reaching into the sky. The moment the peak touched the clouds, boom, there was a flash of lightning, and the world shook. Li Qingshan shuddered as well. All he saw was the lofty mountain collapse in a single moment. Scorching magma and flames surged out from the depths of the earth. There was a speck of golden light among it. It was a curled-up infant, shining with resplendent golden light. Suddenly, it opened its eyes. Its dark golden pupils were pure and deep. It suddenly opened its mouth, but what it produced was not a cry, but a mighty dragon's roar. Chapter 1107. The dragon's cry was endless, growing louder and louder. Although it was formless and traceless, Li Qingshan seemed to see a golden dragon rampaging through the sea of thunder, interrupting the majestic laws of the heavens. In that instant, there was an illusion of tranquility. Li Qingshan could not help but hold his breath. He had once seen the situation when the king of Mirage Sea ascended. The heavenly tribulation of ascension was not just this, or in other words, the true heavenly tribulation of ascension had just begun. At the center of the ring-shaped tribulation cloud, a white pillar of light descended from the sky, bombarding the golden cicada spirit king. Boom! Li Qingshan narrowed his eyes. Just now, he could see clearly that the white pillar of light was the amalgamation of thousands of bolts of lightning, and that boom was the amalgamation of thousands of bolts of lightning. It shook the air violently, shaking the mind. That terrifying power shocked even him. It was as if the heavens had been angered. The golden cicada spirit king, who was curled up like a baby, gradually put his palms together. With a dignified expression, he continued to chant the chant of Devanaga, but only he could hear it. However, that speck of golden light was never extinguished by the lightning. Instead, it went against the light, slowly but firmly ascending. Li Qingshan stood at the edge of the tribulation cloud, gazing at this magnificent spectacle. He thought to himself, "This is what I will soon face. However, it seems like this guy owes me a gift." Just as he was wondering if the golden cicada spirit king had forgotten or was just bluffing him, he suddenly heard a familiar hum. After the mountain protruding from the earth had been bombarded by the tribulation lightning, a huge crater had appeared in its place. The sound came from the crater, and the hum grew louder and louder. Even the thunder could not suppress it. Immediately after, black smoke rose into the sky. That was the gathering of millions of locusts. Like moths to a flame, they pounced toward the blazing white pillar of light. Of course, this was not to help the golden cicada spirit king share the damage of the tribulation. As the swarm of insects swarmed in, the lightning grew brighter and brighter, and the pillar of light grew stronger. This was the test of heaven. No one could avoid it. Relying on external objects was futile. At this time, only one's life-bound item was worth using. If one wanted to use a powerful formation to resist the heavenly tribulation, it would only make the heavenly tribulation stronger. And the power of the heavens was endless. The soaring locust king was taking advantage of this to increase the power of the heavenly tribulation. It was so big that the golden cicada spirit king could not bear it. He's finally here. Li Qingshan sniggered. He took out a communication pendant in the shape of a magatama. He called out, little, and the food delivery is here. Come here quickly. These bugs were the best fuel for the Samadhi white bone fire. However, he didn't receive any response. He couldn't help but feel a little strange, but he didn't think too much about it. She must be focusing on her cultivation. Although it was a pity, he alone was enough to deal with this situation. Seeing that the power of the heavenly tribulation was getting stronger and stronger, Li Qingshan no longer hesitated. He took a deep breath until his belly bulged out and blew hard. A gust of wind whistled out, twisting and twisting like a 1,000-mile-long snake, sweeping away the swarm of insects. The black swarm of insects was as firm as a boulder. Although they had suffered a head-on attack, they were still doing their best to approach the lightning. Let me lend you a hand. Gu Yenying flew to Li Qingshan's side and opened her jade folding fan. With a light wave, gusts of strong wind merged into the gust of wind. The power of the gust of wind increased dramatically in an instant. Before the swarm of insects could approach the lightning, they were sucked into the gust of wind and crushed to pieces. Immediately, the soaring Locust King's attack was suppressed. Thanks, Li Qingshan said telepathically. Where's little and Gu Yenying asked. I don't know. He's probably still cultivating. But we're enough. Li Qingshan shrugged. At this moment, the golden cicada spirit king looked over and nodded slightly as if expressing his gratitude. Li Qingshan waved his hand and decided not to care about the gift anymore. However, the golden cicada spirit king's figure began to change gradually. Its tender skin became stiff and translucent. One could vaguely see that the golden cicada spirit king was no longer in human form. It had turned into a carapace, wriggling under that layer of translucent golden skin. This kind of change did not make people feel strange. Instead, it revealed a sense of holiness, like a gentleman transforming into a leopard or a phoenix rising from the ashes. That is, cicada shedding. Gu Yenying blurted out. She smiled at Li Qingshan beside her and said, Looks like it's for you. Li Qingshan praised in his heart. The golden cicada spirit king was indeed trustworthy. This golden cicada shedding was obviously a good thing. At this time, the swarm of insects had begun to retreat and returned to the underground cave. He suddenly felt a little strange. Things were going too smoothly. Up until now, he had not sensed the soaring Locust King's true form. Could it be that the soaring Locust King has given up on revenge against the golden cicada spirit king? He immediately rejected this idea. The soaring Locust King was obviously not that broad-minded. Or it's afraid of being involved in the divine catastrophe and being intercepted by me, so it's hiding deep underground to control the swarm of insects. This was very possible. The soaring Locust King is not here. Gu Yenying frowned. How do you know? Li Qingshan asked immediately. Too weak. It shouldn't be this weak. It's like a formation without a core. It looks like it's operating, but it can't even exert half of its power. Gu Yenying lowered her eyebrows and pondered. Maybe he knows he's not a match for me, so he doesn't dare to show up. Li Qingshan said. This was the most reasonable guess. In terms of power alone, I'm afraid only the Banyan Tree King can surpass him in the world. If he's really determined to fight, we might not be able to stop him. Gu Yenying said. Is that so? Li Qingshan was surprised. He had never fought with the soaring Locust King face to face. Yes, in the past, when the Locust Plague swept through Qingzhou, no one could stop it. It wasn't just because of caution. At that time, the soaring Locust King was not so cautious. He once gathered the swarm of insects to fight against the army of Chu. Although it ended in failure, that kind of terrifying power was enough to be recorded in the history books. His main body may not be strong, but once he gathered millions of insects, he could fight against an entire country. Such a weak attack is meaningless. Could it be that it's just a bluff, a diversion, and that the focus of his attack isn't here? Li Qingshan thought of little, and who did not respond. He was a little worried, but he felt that it was unlikely, even if the soaring Locust King was really that stupid, little, and was not that weak. Moreover, if she really was in danger, she would naturally ask him for help. Their communication pendants were one yin and one yang. If one was damaged, both would be damaged. Even if the domain was sealed and messages could not be sent, they could still ask each other for help. I can't think of a target more important to the soaring Locust King than the Golden Cicada Spirit King, Gu Yenying said. No, there might be one. Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat. Gu Yenying continued, the Chan Monastery of Devanaga, but that's not impossible. Most of the insects are gathered here. That can't be wrong. The soaring Locust King definitely isn't the four Guardian King's opponent, with his main body strength. At this moment, the Golden Cicada Spirit King used the might of the heavenly tribulation to break free from his cicada shell bit by bit. Perhaps we're thinking too much. Li Qingshan stood with his arms crossed. Perhaps he'll emerge from underground in the next moment. Chapter 11:08. Rumble. A series of lightning bolts streaked across the sky. Heavy rain poured down from the Sword Collection Palace, splashing onto the empty stone plains. Originally, people practiced the sword day and night here, regardless of the cold, heat, wind, frost, rain, or snow. Apart from the thunder and rain, everything was silent. Under the dark clouds, the mountains and forests seemed even darker. Clouds and mist lingered between the mountains. The Sword Collection Palace had already been closed for many days. Under the supervision of the various sword masters, all the disciples had returned to their respective peaks. They were not allowed to leave the palace without permission. At the same time, no outsiders were allowed in either. On Heaven's Reliance Peak, the sword masters and elders of the various peaks gathered in the main hall. The discussion had already gone on for several days. The demon seed had already been planted in their respective sword embryos, but it was not enough to make them completely demonized, nor did they have the right to collude with the demon domain. As a result, some people suggested going to the Chan Monastery of Devanaga and finding a way to purge the demon seed from their sword embryos, but they were immediately met with fierce opposition. Not only was this placing their lives in the hands of others, but even if they succeeded, their cultivation would be destroyed. To a sword cultivator, this was even more terrifying than death. The group split into two groups, accusing one another of cowardice, incompetence, abandoning themselves to depravity, despicable shamelessness. Under the drive of new and old grievances, anger, and demonic nature, someone drew their sword very soon. If it were not for the guest elders who stepped forward to mediate, it would basically become a battle to the death. The walls and pillars of the hall were still covered in many slashes. This was a sight that the Sword Collection Palace had never seen in the past several millennia. The discussion came to nothing, so it fell silent in the end. The lanterns had been extinguished a long time ago, but no one paid any attention to them. Only bolts of lightning would illuminate the hall from time to time, but they could not illuminate everyone's sunken faces. A disheveled, unkempt Taoist priest arrived under the eaves outside the hall. He picked up the gourd of alcohol and took a random sip, gazing at the silver snakes dancing in the dark clouds. He sighed. Sigh, it's been many years since I've seen such restless lightning. It's an ominous sign. I wonder how Zijian is doing. He touched the lightning slaughter sword on his waist and thought, he's fine. The other guest elders emerged from the hall as well, exchanging glances with one another. They were all rather glad that none of them had drawn their swords from the sword collection peak. Some of them were not even sword cultivators, so they did not have to worry about the demonic seed's invasion. The hidden sword peak was submerged in the rolling dark clouds. Only a dozen huge chains that flew into the clouds could prove its existence. From time to time, lightning would strike the chains. The dark chains would light up for a while and then go out again. Gentlemen, I think it's about time. We've already done our best by staying here. They're waiting for the Heaven and Earth Elders to make a decision. If the Heaven and Earth Elders really decide to ally with the demon region, we won't even have a demon seed. I'm afraid it won't be easy. With that, Zhou Tong flew off on his sword. Fellow Taoist, Zhou is right. Let's go. That was exactly what they were thinking. Although the Sword Collection Palace had given them many benefits, it was not their own sect after all. There was no such thing as loyalty. Since this big tree was already on the verge of collapse, the foreign macaques, could not do anything to it. Naturally, he had to leave first. Zhou Tong had just flown into the air when a dignified voice suddenly descended from above the clouds. Without my command, no one is allowed to leave. Elder Tian, the sword masters and elders rushed out of the hall and raised their heads. Through the drifting dark clouds, they saw Elder Tian standing on the hidden sword peak. His eyes flickered with unprecedented light. Zhou Tong felt a tremendous, sharp pressure suddenly fall from the sky, landing heavily on the rock plateau. He could not help but tighten his grip on the lightning slaughter sword and grit his teeth. Looks like the rumors are true. The Sword Collection Palace really is working together with the bastards of the demon region. Whether it's the demon region or the 9 provinces, the only thing we pursue is strength. Only strength can allow us to transcend freely. Without strength, no matter how much good we do, we'll still be like ants. We'll already be lucky to live for 100 years. Elder Tian's voice seemed to resound through the hidden sword peak. It was even louder than thunder. The chains trembled with it, producing a great clatter that mixed with the thunder. It was difficult to tell them apart. Many of the sword masters and elders agreed. The words righteousness and evil were far too abstract. Only strength was real. Even the group who had firmly opposed it in the beginning began to waver under Elder Tian's dignified declaration. Zhou Tong laughed aloud. He called out against the rain. Those who triumph over others are powerful, and those who triumph over themselves are powerful. Elder Tian, you've wasted 1,000 years of cultivation, yet you can't even understand something as simple as that. If you lose your heart, what's the use of strength? Elder Tian said, Zhou Tong, is this the same as Taoism again? Now, I'll show you what's the use of strength. You're a guest elder of the Sword Collection Palace, yet you refuse to follow the ways of the Sword Collection Palace. You can go die. Bang! Zhou Tong was slammed heavily against the stone platform by an invisible force. Elder Zhou, fellow Zhou. The guest elders paled in fright. Let's go. I don't know what he's doing on the hidden sword peak. He can't use his full strength right now. It'll be too late once he manages to free himself, Zhou Tong said with difficulty. Killing you is as easy as flipping my hand. However, the Sword Collection Palace is about to welcome its greatest glory in history. I hope you can witness this with me. Elder Tian said. After so many days of hard work, he was only a step away from refining the Forsaken Immortal Sword. Very soon, he would become the master of the Forsaken Immortal Sword, as well as the master of the Sword Collection Palace. He urged the Forsaken Immortal Sword soul inside, "Hurry up, help me refine the Forsaken Immortal Sword, and I'll release you afterwards. You sure know how to dream. Do you really think you're worthy of being my master?" "No, I don't have a master," the Forsaken Immortal Sword soul said. "What did you say? You want to be chained here forever? If you don't help me refine the Forsaken Immortal Sword, I'll never release you." Elder Tian was both surprised and furious as he threatened sternly. Hee, you're just the final obstacle. Now, my servants, cut off all your chains, and I'll grant you even greater power." The Forsaken Immortal Sword soul's twisted and perverse voice rang out in the heads of all the sword masters and elders. It was filled with a strange, bewitching power, as if it was their own thoughts. The demonic seed immediately erupted, and the demonic nature rapidly spread. "You." Elder Tian heard the voice as well, as if the Forsaken Immortal Sword soul was mocking him for his stupidity. He had reached the most crucial moment of the refinement. Even if he wanted to free himself, he definitely would not be able to do so quickly. Clang! Yin Xiaoqiu immediately pulled out the breaking water sword and slashed at the nearest chain. The sword masters and elders all acted as if they were possessed. Sparks flew everywhere, resonating with the lightning. Zhou Tong stood up and watched this terrifying scene with the other guest elders. Without any hesitation, he flew away as fast as he could. Elder Tian, however, could not move. He could only watch. Once he was freed from the shackles of the Heaven and Earth Sword formation, the Forsaken Immortal Sword soul could kill him with just the backlash of its sword intent. Could it be that he had really lost the gamble this time? At this moment, a sword light rushed out of the ground. Elder Tian waved his sleeve, and all the sword masters and elders were swept away. "Junior brother." Elder Tian was pleasantly surprised. With a great sword cultivator here, the Forsaken Immortal Sword soul's tricks were useless. "Forsaken Immortal, you've used up all your trump cards, but I can still give you a chance. Let me refine it." "Used up all my trump cards? Give me a chance." He. A guest elder had just rushed out of the sea of clouds when he was swallowed in one gulp and chewed to pieces. Zhou Tong suddenly turned around. A flying locust the size of a mountain was breaking through the sea of clouds at an unbelievable speed. Chapter 1109. We're done for. Zhou Tong could not help but hold his breath. His blood seemed to freeze. If the soaring Locust King wanted to kill them, it would be a piece of cake. He only needed a few seconds. However, the pair of cold, emotionless compound eyes only glanced past him before flapping its wings and descending rapidly, pushing aside the black and white clouds. Zhou Tong recovered his breathing and was surprised. Why is the soaring Locust King in such a hurry? He could vaguely make out a vicious demon folk totem imprinted on the wide, withered back of the soaring Locust King. Its demon chi was mixed with heavy demon chi. Without the time to consider the cause and effect, he bit the tip of his tongue and spat a mouthful of blood onto the lightning slaughter sword, taking off as quickly as he could. The soaring locust king. Elder heaven and earth cried out at the same time. Why had it come here? The sword collection peak was the core of the sword formation of heaven and earth. On one hand, it could contain the forsaken immortal sword, but on the other hand, it could draw on its power to fend off external enemies. It was originally an extremely ingenious design, but Elder Heaven had entered a stalemate with the sword soul in order to refine the forsaken immortal sword, causing the sword formation of heaven and earth to lose its core. The soaring locust king broke through the sword formation easily, with a flap of its wings. It hovered above the sword collection palace, parting the wind and rain. The forsaken immortal sword soul said, "You stinking bugs sure are slow. So much for wasting so much effort to control the timing. Shut up. Do you want to be trapped here?" The soaring locust king roared furiously. "Then do you want to carry this hatred forever? You're just a powerless, puny, stinking bug. You need my strength, so no matter how I humiliate you, you'll endure it, because this bit of humiliation is completely insignificant compared to true hatred, though we're both trapped here, so I can't help but feel a hint of sympathy for you. He. Come, release me. Make everyone in the world pay the price." The soaring locust king gritted its teeth. Unless it had no other choice, it would never release the sword. However, at this moment, the figure of the golden cicada spirit king undergoing the tribulation appeared through the countless compound eyes. Millions of images overlapped together as it bellowed out, "Golden cicada!" The fierce winds kicked up by its wings uprooted countless trees. Roaring lightning ripped through the sky. "Junior brother, stop him quickly. Without the protection of the insects, he's not much stronger than regular demon kings," Elder Heaven said. Myriad sword technique. Elder D made a sword gesture and stared at the soaring locust king. Thousands of sword gleams appeared beside him, ready to strike. Scram! The soaring locust king let out a roar as demonic chi exploded from its body. Its huge body grew even larger, and its yellowish body was now dyed with a layer of black. Bone spikes protruded from its body, making it look even more ferocious. It flapped its wings loudly, but it did not charge towards Elder Earth. Instead, it pounced towards the nearest chain. Its ferocious mouth bit down viciously, and more than half of the chain broke. "Junior brother, hurry up," Elder Tion urged anxiously. Compared to the soaring locust king, this was the true terror. However, Elder D did not make a move. The sword gleam beside him gradually dispersed. With a serious expression, he said to Elder Tion, who was on the hidden sword peak, "Senior brother, you've lost the bet." If he had to fight with the soaring locust king, he could barely give it a try. However, it was impossible for him to stop the soaring locust king from biting through the chains and destroying the sword formation. "Save me." Elder Tion stretched out his hand, and Elder D flew away on his sword without looking back. The flying locust king's sharp mouthparts clamped down forcefully, snapping one of the chains in half. The chain then lashed onto the sky-leaning peak. Countless buildings were reduced to rubble, debris flying everywhere. Bang! 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 The chains snapped one by one, dancing wildly like tentacles, lashing at the mountains that had once restrained it. The sword formation of heaven and earth was on the verge of collapse, and all the swords on the hidden sword peak began to tremble and ring. In the depths of the hidden sword peak, a strange sound radiated out, causing all the swords in the sword collection palace to tremble and ring. In the blink of an eye, only a single chain remained on the sky-leaning peak. It reached straight up into the sky. "All right, there's only one more. Your mission is complete," the forsaken immortal sword soul said. You can break free from this one yourself." The soaring Locust King turned around, flapped its wings, and took off. "Hee, how clever!" The forsaken immortal sword soul turned to Elder Tion and said, "Now it's just you and me. Don't refine me. Come." A frenzied sword intent rushed into Elder Tion's sea of consciousness. It was unstoppable and unstoppable. "Stop. Let me go, or I'll blow up my sword-nascent soul." Elder Tion called out, "Are you saying that you want me to be gentle? Don't worry, I'll be very gentle." The forsaken immortal sword soul said slowly. The frenzied sword intent suddenly vanished. Before Elder Tion could even catch his breath, the sword intent that had vanished suddenly erupted again. It had somehow infiltrated the depths of his sea of consciousness. He suddenly widened his eyes, and resplendent light shone from his eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. He stretched his limbs as far as he could, and his robes became filled with sword chi. But I still prefer to be a little more violent. It's a pity that this body is far too fragile. It can't compare to that Li Qingshan. I'll just refine it a little." The forsaken immortal sword soul said. At that moment, the sky full of lightning gathered on the hidden sword peak and Elder Tion. Elder Tion's consciousness was like a candle flickering in the wind. It could be extinguished at any time. Blowing up his sword-nascent soul was already a pipe dream. He glanced at a lone mountain from the corner of his eye and suddenly remembered what someone had said to him 1,000 years ago. Tion, obtaining a famed sword isn't all luck. An ordinary person can also wield an iron sword, but a famed sword is much more dangerous. Remember, the sword is not a friend, nor is it a lover. It is cold and heartless. You must hold the hilt tightly, or else you will be hurt by the sword. That was his first master, who had taught him the most basic of swordsmanship. But after he had passed the heavenly tribulation and obtained the famed sword, he no longer had the right to teach him. In the end, he had given him these words, but they were already unclear. He had never taken those words to heart. An old man who had never passed the second heavenly tribulation in his life had no right to teach him the air of a famed sword. Instead, he felt that this kind of fear would only affect his cultivation. Am I wrong? No, you're not wrong. You're just not strong enough. The forsaken immortal sword soul answered. Elder Tion could no longer hear it. His consciousness had been completely destroyed by the frenzied and twisted sword intent. The light from his eyes, ears, mouth, and nose slowly disappeared. His expression slowly twisted, and his temperament changed. He was filled with a perverse aura. He waved his sleeves. There was a flash of light, and the last chain fell silently. Even the wind and rain were cut apart. The sun shone with golden light, but none of it was as glorious as the strike. The thousands of swords on the hidden sword peak resonated together. The hidden sword peak fell down like a broken kite, directly colliding with the hidden sword pavilion. Boom! The entrance of the hidden sword pavilion collapsed, and the hidden sword peak twisted as if it had been forcefully squeezed through the entrance, vanishing. At this moment, the sword masters and elders all roused. The demonic thoughts in their hearts had instead receded a lot. Controlling people's hearts through demonic seeds could not last for long. They stared at the horrific sight of the Sword Collection Palace and had yet to completely recover from their shock. Chapter 11:10. Old bastard, you want to bury me with a sword tomb? Let's see who's the master of the sword tomb now. Elder Tion spread his arms and laughed madly. His eyes had no pupils, only the scara, with the Sword Collection Peak as the center, the realm of heaven and earth that existed between reality and illusion twisted and changed, turning into a sinister, terrifying domain of demons. It enveloped the Sword Collection Palace and dyed the the sun blood-red. Under everyone's fearful gazes, the sword collection peak slowly rose up. Elder Tion suddenly lowered his head and smiled viciously. I almost forgot about you ants crawling around. I've already waited several thousand years for this day. His old face became even more vicious. His body twisted and arched, and he suddenly roared out, "Kill, kill, 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 kill!" Clang! The thousands of swords on the sword collection peak basically shot out from the rock at the same time, turning into thousands of streaks of light as they spiraled down. As they whistled through the air, heads fell to the ground one by one. His swordsmanship was extremely exquisite. Even the swordmasters and elders could not block a single strike. Some of them could not even control the swords in their hands, stabbing them into their own bodies. In the blink of an eye, the sword collection palace flowed with blood. Even the wild beasts in the mountains were slaughtered. There was truly no one left alive. It seems to have happened too quickly. I haven't even had my fun yet. Elder Tion looked towards the south. It's time to help that little bug complete his foolish wish. The bloody swords flew back, lining up around the sword collection peak. The sword formation of heaven and earth had been reactivated. Not only did it possess an absolute core now, but its power had also surpassed anything in the past after fusing with the realm of heaven and earth. The sword collection peak slowly tilted, and the tip pointed towards Great Buddha Mountain. Suddenly, it vanished from where it was, leaving behind a long streak of light. It was unbelievable that a mountain could actually fly at such speed. If it were not for the fact that it was only a sword and not a regular creature, the heavenly tribulation of ascension would have descended a long time ago. Now, it had descended into the world with power that surpassed the third heavenly tribulation. Was there anyone that could match it? I want the entire world to become my realm of the sword. 1,000 kilometers away, the soaring Locust King maintained a sufficiently safe distance. It watched this from afar. It let out extremely delighted laughter. "Ha ha ha ha, Golden Cicada, do you see that? Don't worry, I'll let you see it." "What is that?" The dauntless monk emerged from the grand hall that was currently under construction. He looked to the north. It was broad daylight. However, there was a star that grew brighter and brighter, emitting a cold and demonic light that made him feel a deep sense of foreboding. A figure jumped up from the back of the mountain. He landed beside the dauntless monk. "Senior brother, they've come with ill intentions." The two other monk kings sensed something too and gathered over. "Should we evacuate the disciples?" "No, it's too late. Activate the spell formation and prepare to face the enemy." "So fast. What is that?" A monk king formed a seal with both hands and pointed at his temples at the same time. 2 golden rays shot out from his eyes as he used the heavenly eye to see the Devil Star clearly. He was stunned. "That seems to be Hidden Sword Peak." "What?" The dauntless monk was in disbelief. A few days ago, Li Qingshan had carried an entire mountain, which had already left everyone extremely shocked. The sword collection peak was not small either, so how could he fly through the air with such speed? Elder Tion from the sword collection palace is up there. Impossible. He can't possibly have such magic power. Don't worry about it so much. Guardian King subdues demons. The 4 Guardian Kings fell into a formation together, and a furious Guardian King rose up from the ground, standing on Great Buddha Mountain. He swung his Vajra pestle and received the Devil Star that grew closer and closer. The sword collection peak whistled through the air. Just when everyone thought it was going to collide with Great Buddha Mountain, it stopped without any prior signs, which made it seem even more strange. Finally, there are a few decent fellows worth killing. Elder Tion tilted his head and smiled at the furious Guardian King. His body seemed extremely uncoordinated, like a marionette on strings. You're not Elder Tion. Who are you? The dauntless monk asked in surprise. Whether it was the ever-changing sword realm of heaven and earth or the thousands of actual swords, they both allowed him to directly sense the enemy's strength. Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Elder Tion's expression changed several times, making various twisted and exaggerated expressions. Suddenly, he let out a vicious laugh. Dead people don't need to know. In the vast ink sea, there was only one small island. There were mountains, rivers, trees, flowers, birds, fish, and insects on it, but they were all ink-black, wavering between reality and illusion. They would even alternate with one another from time to time. In a small, thatched hut on the island, Chu Danqing faced the space before him, focusing on painting. Beside him was the Dragon King of the Sea, who stood with his hands behind his back. When Chu Danqing stopped, the birds at the tip of the brush came to life and flew out the window. There were only a few strokes, extremely simple, but also extremely vivid. The Dragon King of the Sea nodded. Not bad. Thank you for your praise, Master, Chu Danqing said. A pair of dragons' eyes suddenly condensed in the Dragon King of the Sea's hollow eyes. He raised his head and gazed into the distance, frowning deeply. Master, what's wrong? Chu Danqing asked. It's broken free, the Dragon King of the Sea said. Who is it? A demon's sword. The ink sea suddenly surged. Great waves rose like mountains. With a mighty dragon's roar, an ink dragon rushed into the air. The world rumbled and flickered under the impact of the tribulation lightning. The golden cicada spirit king gradually broke free from his shell, reverting to the form of an infant. His eyes were slightly closed, and his expression was tranquil. Lines of Sanskrit floated over his body. Li Qingshan held his breath. The most crucial moment had finally arrived. Whether he could ascend successfully or not would depend on this moment. Golden Cicada, are you leaving? The soaring Locust King's voice rang out from the underground cavern, like the sounds of countless locusts flapping their wings had merged together. Golden Cicada, oh Golden Cicada, I once trusted you so much. Just what has this betrayal gotten you? The position of abbot of the Chan Monastery of Devanaga? He. Forceful attacks didn't work, so you've changed to bewitching him. Gu Yenying said. You really won't give up. Li Qingshan was unconvinced. With the Golden Cicada Spirit King's willpower, how could a few words sway him? The Golden Cicada Spirit King was completely unfazed. He brought his palms together, solemnly, enduring the attacks of the tribulation lightning calmly. Everything you've done has come to nothing. You want to protect the people of the world, but I've devoured 10 times more mortals than last time. You want to save the Chan Monastery of Devanaga. Very soon, there won't be a single living person left on Great Buddha Mountain, and the demon domain will invade the 9 provinces once more. And this time, no one will be able to stop them. The entire world will fall. If all living things don't demonify, they'll die. Where's your mercy? What the hell is he talking about? Li Qingshan's rationality told him that the soaring Locust King was just spouting nonsense to disturb the Golden Cicada Spirit King. However, his instincts told him that the soaring Locust King was serious. Qingshan, something's not right. Gu Yenying held a copper coin and divined urgently. Li Qingshan closed his eyes and powered the spirit turtle to sense around. Suddenly, he sensed that the people close to him were in great danger. Chapter 11:11. Under the Tribulation Cloud. The swarm of insects surged out from the underground caves and spread out on the uneven ground like an undulating sea of insects. Billions of locusts opened their wings at the same time, strangely reflecting a mountain peak that looked like a Buddha. The sun was shining brightly, but Great Buddha Mountain was shrouded in a huge shadow. Hidden Sword Peak. Li Qingshan's pupils shrank as he saw the source of the shadow. Oh no, his target is the Chan Monastery of Devanaga. Gu Yenying frowned. Buzz. The Hidden Sword Peak let out a sword cry, and all the sword edges trembled with it, turning into tens of thousands of sword lights, whistling down like a meteor shower. The sound of Sanskrit rang out again, but without the accompaniment of the bell and drum. It seemed very weak and almost drowned out by the whistling sound. The formation can't hold on for much longer. Attack! The dauntless monk ordered. Good, the 3 monk kings said in unison. Bang! The glaring Vajra leaped up from Great Buddha Mountain, swung his Vajra against the rain of swords, and struck towards Hidden Sword Peak. Demon vanquishing Vajra. The tip of the pestle shone with an extremely bright light, like a golden star rising into the sky. However, to the dauntless monk's surprise, the whistling rain of swords did not stop their attacks. They swam around in the surroundings and formed a sword formation of heaven and earth, sealing up the entire mountain. Not only does he want to destroy the Demon Suppression Hall, he also wants to kill us all. There's no difference. As long as the hall lives, I live. If the hall dies, I die. The unraging monk said firmly. Watching over the Demon Suppression Hall was his mission. The other 3 monk kings had resolute expressions as well. Even if they had to put their lives on the line, they had to stop the invasion of the demon territory, and there was absolutely no reason for them to flee in the face of battle. Heaven and Earth Sword Chi. Elder Tian revealed a twisted, cold smile. He got into a stance and pointed at the Hidden Sword Peak below him. Charge! The Hidden Sword Peak suddenly emitted a magnificent streak of light. Li Qingshan basically treated it as tribulation lightning. He never expected the power of the Hidden Sword Peak to be so terrifying. It was definitely not something that Chan Monastery of Devanaga could block. Do you see that? Golden Cicada, this is the fate of the Chan Monastery of Devanaga. Very soon, the demon domain will descend once more. You can imagine the fate of the 9 provinces. Don't you have a merciful heart? If you want to ascend at this time, where can you escape to? The soaring Locust King roared with laughter. The Golden Cicada Spirit King glanced down. His ascension immediately came to a halt, and his mind trembled slightly. The Chan Monastery of Devanaga held extraordinary significance to him. He had once comprehended his true self there, set foot on the right path. The consequences of the destruction of the Demon Suppression Hall were even more unimaginable. He couldn't help but look at Li Qingshan. Just focus on transcending the tribulation. Their plot will not succeed. Yenying, I'll leave this to you. Li Qingshan suddenly unfurled his phoenix wings and released a wave of air. He flew towards Great Buddha Mountain. He felt rather uneasy. He had a vast network of friends, but there were not a lot of people he was close to. The unraging monk was an extremely important one. He thought, Master, you have to hold on. But I also want to forget it. Gu Yenying blew at the corner of her mouth, brushed away a few strands of hair in front of her forehead, and looked down at the swarm of insects. We can watch from here anyway. With a boom, the ground cracked, and soil and rock were thrown into the air. The image formed by the swarm of insects was ripped to pieces by the shock wave. Li Qingshan's mirror clone stood on the ground. His promise to the Golden Cicada Spirit King was still valid. Fine. Gu Yenying closed her eyes. The Golden Cicada Spirit King smiled and looked away. Ha 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 ha, Golden Cicada, do you think he can stop the forsaken immortal sword? And right now, who's still going to stop me? The soaring Locust King laughed madly. The voice was no longer the collective buzzing of the swarm of insects. Instead, it originated from even deeper underground. It was dry and hoarse, and a violent demon chi rushed into the air, mixed with gloomy demon chi. Gu Yenying shivered inside. The soaring Locust King's original body had arrived. Everything he had done was for the Golden Cicada Spirit King in the end. All the swarm of insects surged out from underground, but they did not rush up in a frenzy. Instead, they lined up and formed a formation, constantly changing. It was as if a chaotic army had a leader, and the atmosphere changed. The soaring Locust King stepped on the insect cloud and slowly rose from underground, standing at the core of the formation. It was the absolute master of this army of locusts. A pair of cold compound eyes stared at the Golden Cicada Spirit King in the sky, carrying with it a bone-deep hatred. Before he even made a move, he had already given Gu Yenying a huge pressure that she had never felt before. Li Qingshan is here. Li Qingshan urged his clone to step on the sea of insects, cutting through the waves and punching towards the soaring Locust King. Layers of black shockwaves stacked up, giving people the illusion that it was moving slowly. Although the clone only had 30 to 40% of his original body's strength, the destructive power of this punch was already above that of a normal demon king. He wanted to kill the general of the army and defeat this army of locusts. The soaring Locust King waved his hand without turning back. A withered yellow hand formed by locusts rose from the sea of insects, slapping towards Li Qingshan. Boom! The fist and the palm collided, and a wave of air swept out. The withered yellow hand collapsed, and Li Qingshan's clone was also slapped away. He spread his wings and steadied himself, frowning. The soaring Locust King's current strength is indeed as strong as Gu Yenying said. If his enemy was me, I could still deal with him, but to stop him from interfering with the Golden Cicada Spirit King's tribulation is almost impossible. And this hatred is too great, there's no way to pull it back. What should I do? The soaring Locust King ignored everyone else, only the Golden Cicada Spirit King in his compound eyes. He clenched his claws tightly. Golden Cicada, you will pay the most terrible price for everything you've done, including your life. Sigh. The Golden Cicada Spirit King sighed, unable to refute. It was all karma. Subdue the demon. The four monk kings roared in unison. Vajra went against the flow, breaking through the whistling sword light, and the Vajra struck the hidden sword peak. At this moment, the mysterious figure of Elder Tian suddenly appeared. His left hand waved his big sleeve, and his right hand formed a sword with his fingers, lightly touching the forehead of the Vajra. Thump! Like a long, drawn-out chime, the Vajra remained still. Its body dimmed. After what seemed like a very, very long time, a crack extended from its forehead, spreading across its entire body. The crack shone with golden light. Boom! The Vajra shattered, and the formation collapsed. The four monk kings fell out of the sky, their faces filled with disbelief. They could accept defeat. Li Qingshan had just defeated them in an open battle not long ago, but a crushing defeat like this was far too quick and unbelievable. The Guardian King's formation of demon subduing was the most powerful formation of the Chan Monastery of Devanaga. It was open and above board without any openings. Even Li Qingshan could only break through it with absolute strength. However, the power that Elder Tian had unleashed was much smaller than Li Qingshan's. The magnificent sword light was merely a feint, actually finding the weakest point of the Guardian King's formation of demon, subduing in the blink of an eye, grasping its openings, and destroying it in a single strike. Suddenly, he discovered that compared to great power, what was even more terrifying about it was the supreme path of the sword that completely surpassed this world. He, how dare you show off before me with tricks that are nothing more than acrobatics? You can all go die. Elder Tian stuck out his scarlet tongue and spread his fingers, swinging them down. Chapter 11:12. Bang! Boom! Wallala! The four monk kings smashed through the roof of the hall of great strength under construction and smashed heavily onto the ground. Their expressions changed for a while before they recovered their solemn expressions and sat down amidst the dust and debris. Sanskrit world purification. The dauntless monk sat towards the south and raised his arms. The three other monk kings stood back to back with him, facing north, south, east, and west. They assumed different postures as they chanted. A towering Sanskrit chakram appeared, protecting the monastery. The sounds of Sanskrit that had almost been drowned out by the cries of the swords suddenly grew louder, containing the chant of Devanaga. The four monk kings worked together to power the Sanskrit formation of world purification. After exchanging blows just now, they knew that they were no match for Elder Tian, not to mention protecting the demon suppression hall. The only thing they could rely on was this mountain guarding formation. Futile effort. Elder Tian smiled viciously. He pressed his hands down, and the sword collection peak slowly descended. Its shadow expanded as the sword of heaven and earth shrouded the sky. Everything seemed to be a reenactment of the destruction of the sword collection palace. Once Protector Jalan came into contact with the heaven and earth sword realm, he was immediately shaken, like a reflection in the water encountering a wave, and could only struggle at death's door. Originally, it shouldn't have been so weak, but the battle not long ago had almost completely destroyed the foundation of the mountain guarding array. Although the master of the Sword Collection Palace had failed to achieve his original objective, he had cleared away the greatest obstacle for the Sword Collection Peak's attack. The sound of Sanskrit became faint again. Great Buddha Mountain trembled violently. The palaces and pavilions collapsed soundlessly. One of the monks looked at this scene in fear. Suddenly, he felt his face moisten, and he reached out to touch it. His hands were dyed red. Looking around, he saw that other than the monks who had survived the heavenly tribulation, everyone else had blood seeping out of their pores, drenching their monk robes. In the blink of an eye, they had turned into a bloodied man. It was only at this moment that he could faintly hear the sharp cry of a sword. Although the battle not long ago had also brought great shock to the monks, it was still a real and powerful force that was difficult to resist, and the damage caused was not extensive. Everything in front of him was like a nightmare coming true. Familiar faces were covered in blood, and they could not help but feel great terror in their hearts. Immediately, someone let out a hysterical scream, and a chain of screams rang out, one after another. It will be a Buddhist holy land. It became a hell. The sound of Sanskrit rose again, but it seemed to be polluted and distorted by the screams. It was no longer a wonderful revelation. It was more like a sinister incantation. Even those monks who had survived heavenly tribulations and had extraordinary cultivation began to waver, and their eyes became bloodshot. "Senior brother, this is a demonic tune. If this goes on, all the disciples will go crazy and die." The unraging monk said sternly. He had witnessed the abilities of countless demon folk and heard of many strange demonic sounds, but none of them could compare to this. It could actually penetrate the sound of Sanskrit formation of purification and even distort the sound of Sanskrit. This was basically unheard of. Hold on. Wait for his King Chu's rescue. The dauntless monk's face was ashen, but he did not waver at all. All right. However, there was one worry that they did not voice out. Would Chu Lai King really be able to save such a terrifying enemy? Right at this moment, a black line suddenly appeared on the horizon, twisting and moving, pulling up a dark cloud that shrouded the horizon. Within the cloud, scales and claws could be vaguely seen, and a majestic dragon had stretched out. The dragon's roar immediately drowned out the sharp sword cry. Clouds followed dragons, and wind followed tigers. However, at a closer glance, the dark clouds in the sky were not actual clouds. Instead, they seemed like thick ink that had melted into water, giving off an ethereal feeling. The dauntless monk was astounded. The Dragon King of the Sea had always lived in seclusion, never paying attention to the affairs of the world. He never thought he would actually leave the ink sea, but he wondered whether he was a friend or a foe. If he was a friend, then he would be the rarest form of assistance, but if he was an enemy, then probably no one could save the monastery. As a result, he said, "Your Majesty, this demon wants to destroy the demon suppression hall and lead the demon domain to invade. So please assist us. All life in the world will be grateful for your kindness." What do the lives of the world have to do with me? The Dragon King of the Sea said. The dauntless monk's heart sank. Hee, and I was wondering who it was. Turns out it's you, you blind fool. It's been so many years since you broke free from the painting tomb, yet you haven't come to help your old acquaintance. How disloyal. Though it's not too late now. Work with me and wreak havoc. Let's show all life the terrors of us inanimate objects, said Elder Tion. Inanimate objects. The Dragon King of the Sea said. Dark clouds that resembled ink pressed down, as thin as silk and as tall as mountains and cities, changing and changing, possessing both ethereal and heavy weight. What are you angry? Don't tell me you still want to pretend you're alive. We all know that you're not just an inanimate object, but an incomplete inanimate object. That's because that old bastard refuses to even give you the most basic form of perfection, which is why you're so weak. If you don't want to work with me, then just watch. A scarlet star shot through the sky. Li Qingshan flew as fast as he could, crossing several thousand kilometers in a short while. Great Buddha Mountain came into view, but he suddenly frowned. Dragon King of the Sea. Then he took out a jade talisman for communication. Little, and come to Great Buddha Mountain and help out. Although it was only the image projected by the soaring Locust King, he had already confirmed that the Sword Collection Peak was an unprecedented great enemy. If his old enemy, the Dragon King of the Sea, were included, it would definitely be a great battle. However, Little and still did not reply. He could not care so much for now. He arrived before Great Buddha Mountain and called out, "You're still alive, right?" "Ha ha! How can I bear to die if I don't see my damned disciple one last time?" The unraging monk roused with vigor and laughed aloud. Now, this was his most trustworthy and powerful ally. "Wait, I'm coming to save you right now." Li Qingshan eased up, right when he was about to fly over. A dragon tail tore through the sea of clouds and swung over, blocking his path. The Dragon King of the Sea turned around and stared at him. "Dragon King, this isn't the place we agreed on for the final battle." Li Qingshan felt tremendous pressure. Although he had already become even more powerful, the Dragon King of the Sea was still a powerful enemy that he could not underestimate. If it were any other day, he would not mind engaging in a great battle and trying out new techniques, but right now, he had to prioritize the unraging monk's life. The Dragon King of the Sea said nothing. His ink-black mane swayed despite the absence of wind. In this silence, The sea of clouds froze as well. Nicely done. Stop this kid. Once I slaughter these bald donkeys, I'll come help you kill him. Elder Tion smiled viciously and powered the sword formation of heaven and earth. The swords revolved and condensed greater and greater power, about to completely destroy the formation of Sanskrit's sound of purification. Shut up! The Dragon King of Ink Sea let out a furious roar, and the sea of clouds surged, rushing into the heaven and earth sword formation. It dyed the heaven and earth illusion black, and the sword formation's operation immediately became sluggish. Don't ever compare me to you again. Li Qingshan was rather surprised. He never thought the Dragon King of the Sea would actually stand on his side. As if he could hear his thoughts, the Dragon King of the Sea said without even looking back, Li Qingshan, I'm not helping you. Chapter 11:13. Within the ink-black clouds, the Dragon King of the Sea flew through the air, flickering in and out of sight. He swept up the sea of clouds and surged towards the sword collection peak. Li Qingshan tiptoed through the air, advancing steadily. With each step, he grew 10 times larger. The space trembled and produced a hollow echo like the beating of war drums, growing louder and louder. The 4 monk kings all eased up. With such a powerful ally, what was there to be afraid of? However, they also found it extremely absurd. The Chan monastery of Devanaga rejected demons, yet in the end, they needed 2 great demon kings to save them. The dauntless monk's expression changed slightly. The world was currently in turmoil. The demon domain could invade on a large scale at any time. Everything right now was only the prelude. At a time like this, the conflict between humans and demons had already become secondary. If they could not gather all the strength of this world as much as possible, they would probably follow in the footsteps of the other folk. Perhaps the Chan monastery of Devanaga would have to change their strategy. Li Qingshan could not help but sigh. The changes in the world were always unexpected. He never thought his greatest enemy would actually become his greatest ally. The Dragon King of the Sea truly was a first-rate ally. Elder Tion showed no fear at all. He smacked his lips. How pitiful! You still can't break free from that old bastard's will. You seem like a dragon, but you're actually just a dog. No, you're even worse than a dog. Dogs can bark a few times according to their own will, but everything you do is a clumsy imitation. Whether I'm a dragon or a dog is not something you can evaluate. And whose will did your vicious sword intent originate from? The Dragon King of the Sea answered with a question. His voice was dignified and mighty, no different from a true dragon's. What a joke! Do you know how the person who forged me died? I can still remember the taste of his blood even now. Why don't you kill that old bastard for me to see? Even that old bastard can't change my sword intent. Elder Tion said proudly, You have to betray yourself to prove your existence? What a pitiful guy. If you're the sword forger, so what? Can you prove that you didn't originate from him? Are you just that much more powerful than a dog? If a dog refuses to admit it's a dog, all it can do is become a mad dog. Li Qingshan shook his head in disagreement. It's you. I'm going to make you regret it. Elder Tion seemed to have been stabbed in pain, his expression becoming increasingly distorted. The heaven and earth sword realm was in a state of chaos, shrinking and retreating in the surging of the dark clouds. The Dragon King of the Sea was deep in thought. Every thought had to be considered if it originated from himself. It was indeed an extremely painful process. When these inanimate objects developed intelligence, the biggest problem was how to coexist with these innate wills. Whether it was to comply or to resist, there was a huge contradiction. Li Qingshan was a living being who didn't seem to be very intelligent, yet he was able to point out the crux of the problem with a single sentence and cause the chaos and contradiction of the forsaken immortal sword soul. It was truly unexpected to have such a cultivation at such a young age. It seemed like it was not just a fortuitous encounter. Cut the crap. Li Qingshan's body was already more than 7,000 feet tall. He swung the equally huge and ferocious dying flower saber at the hidden sword peak. The saber aura contained the power of vibration, leaving a black trail behind. It was as if even the void had turned black and torn apart. Die! Elder Tian's expression became more and more ferocious. He suddenly opened his arms, his ears, eyes, mouth, and nose shot out tens of thousands of feet of sword aura. The sword aura then combined into one and instantly pierced through Li Qingshan's chest. It then pierced through the dark clouds before disappearing. There was almost no time to react. It easily devoured the skin and flesh, revealing the craggy bones, which also trembled and dissolved in the sword aura. Li Qingshan did not care at all. He gripped the hilt of the saber tightly and slashed into the heaven and earth sword formation. Countless long swords met the edge of the saber, but they all shattered upon contact. Although the saber's momentum was much slower because of this, it was still as steady as a mountain as it slashed towards Elder Tian. Boom! A loud noise was heard. The saber slashed onto the hidden sword peak, leaving a deep mark. The cracks spread quickly, and large pieces of earth and rocks collapsed. Although Elder Tian had avoided the attack, he had never been Li Qingshan's target in the first place. He had long seen that Elder Tian was only a puppet or a sword slave. The real enemy was this hidden sword peak. The phoenix fire on Li Qingshan's chest burned, trying its best to fill the huge hole. This strange hidden sword peak was as strong as expected, if it was not for the Dragon King of the Sea restraining the heaven and earth sword formation and the heaven and earth sword realm. His full-powered slash would not have been able to pose a threat to it. This kind of power had far surpassed that of a normal grand cultivator. It had entered a higher realm. If it was a one-on-one fight, there was almost no chance of winning. It was really important to have a strong teammate. It's only SOSO. Li Qingshan laughed maniacally and slashed towards the hidden sword peak again. A light spot suddenly lit up between his brows. A huge sense of danger rose in his heart, and he hurriedly pulled back his saber to block. Boom! A streak of light collided with the blade and erupted with 1,000 streaks of light, like resplendent flowers. Every single streak of light was almost as powerful as a strike from a grand cultivator of the sword. Li Qingshan's colossal body retreated as well. His feet carved out 2 deep ravines in the ground. He pushed back with his right foot and crushed a small mountain. Just now he had stopped, but before he could even catch his breath, the 1,000 streaks of light reversed and shot towards his vitals. The way of the sword was profound, and he could not dodge them. Final radiance of the setting sun. Li Qingshan said calmly. Pieces of the spirit turtle's profound shell rose up, forming a perfect sphere, and reversing all of the light, shooting it towards Elder Tian. The Dragon King of the Sea could not help but look over. He could clearly sense that he had become much stronger than when they clashed back then. This rate of growth was unbelievable. However, he would not let such a great opportunity slip by. He pushed in the inky clouds again, infiltrating the realm of heaven and earth further, and compressing the sword formation of heaven and earth. He knew very well that he did not need to be the main attacker in this battle. Elder Tian's expression changed slightly. As a demon, Li Qingshan possessed a little too many abilities. He pushed forward with his hands and collected all of the streaks of light into his palms. He closed his hands and condensed the streaks of light into a ball of light. Then he swung out forcefully, and a ring of light appeared, dispersing the thick, inky clouds. He faced two enemies alone, while maintaining his pressure against the four monk kings. He actually did not lose the upper hand at all. Kid, this sword is very powerful. If it weren't for the fact that he doesn't have a corresponding sword master, you wouldn't be his opponent at all. The wildflower blade soul, who never spoke much in battle, could not help but say, "He's going to have a sword master very soon. Watch as I suppress and subdue him." Li Qingshan said, "Don't you dare. Cut him down. That'll depend on your performance. Come, madman at the end of the road." Li Qingshan laughed aloud. He became one with the blade and swung about wildly, knocking away the streaks of light that whistled over. He approached the hidden sword peak step by step. The collision between blade aura and sword chi was thunderous. At this moment, there was a flash of red on the horizon. A streak of scarlet light whistled over and struck the hidden sword peak. Chapter 11:14. The hidden sword peak was blasted to the side, and a huge crater was formed. Large pieces of earth and rocks crumbled. This was a weapon that only the king of a state could possess. In terms of destructive power, it was indeed shockingly strong. It could be said that this was the fierce king of Chu's true strong estate, because unlike the Yao, the human cultivators were never stingy with the use of external objects. Even the sword faction, which focused on their own cultivation, needed a peerless sword. And the Crimson Dragon King was the sword in Chu Lai King's hand. Li Qingshan could not help but sigh. If this Crimson Dragon King had been present during the battle that day, the outcome of the battle would have been uncertain. "Your Majesty, King Chu, long time no see. How have you been?" He greeted with a smile. However, with his mouth full of fangs, his expression was naturally ferocious. Chu Lai King glanced at him and cupped his fists. "I'm late. Thank you, Dragon King, for coming to my aid." "I'm not helping you. There's no need to thank me," the Dragon King of the Sea said calmly. "Of course I understand. Whether or not I thank you is up to me. It has nothing to do with you," Chu Lai King said calmly. "Ha, these two fellows." Li Qingshan sneered in his heart. However, he also understood that at this stage they had their own pride. They were not as casual as him. Therefore, a human king, a demon king, and a half-human, half-demon. Although there were many conflicts between them, they stood on the same side. With the three peerless masters of the Green State joining forces, there was no longer any suspense in this battle. "You damned." Elder Tian steadied himself. His expression became more and more inhuman. Before he finished speaking, 1,000 years entering the painting, the Dragon King of the Sea spun and soared. The sky and earth were all white, except for the dark clouds that were as thick as ink. Other than the soaring black dragon, all the other sceneries turned pale. It was as if a magnificent painting was unfolding. The boundless world, from the ancient times to the present, was drawn into the painting. Frenzied saber of the end, descent of the blood moon. In an instant, Li Qingshan swung his saber 1,000 times and combined them into one attack. An arc of saber aura pierced through the air. It was as red as blood. It was blazing like fire, like a blood moon descending from the heavens, irreversible and unstoppable. On this pale painting scroll, the most distinct existence. Chu Lai King soared into the sky. The Red Dragon King let out another furious roar, and the main cannon at the head of the warship spat out a beam of scarlet light like a real dragon's fire. It destroyed everything in its path. At the same time, he flipped his right hand and raised the small cauldron that had experienced the vicissitudes of life. Then he spread out a domain in the sky. Not only did it not conflict with the Dragon King of the Sea's painting, but it further increased its might. Without communicating telepathically or exchanging glances, Li Qingshan, Chu Lai King, and the Dragon King of the Sea attacked at the same time, but their teamwork was extremely tacit, as if they had practiced it thousands of times. As the painting unfolded and the Qingzhou cauldron pressed down, the heaven and earth sword realm actually showed signs of collapsing. The tens of thousands of swords also became pale and powerless, completely suppressing the heaven and earth sword formation. The black color spread, dyeing the green hidden sword peak, as if it had become a mountain in a painting. At the same time, the blood moon fell into the hidden sword peak. It was only when the scarlet light bombarded the peak that a smooth saber mark appeared without a sound. There were countless sword holes on the hidden sword peak, shooting out countless beams of bloodlight. The blood moon in the peak instantly collapsed, turning into thousands of violent saber auras that destroyed everything. In an instant, the hidden sword peak was covered in cracks, and bloodlight floated within it. It trembled violently as if it would collapse at any time. Li Qingshan thought to himself, after these two great enemies became my helpers, this battle seems to have become a little too simple. The four monk kings looked up at the sky that looked like an ink mountain painting, and all of them felt extremely shocked. This was the power of their joint attack. The hidden sword peak, which had been so difficult to resist just a moment ago, was actually almost destroyed by a single move. It was exactly because of experts like them that the demon domain's invasions failed time and time again. Originally, they planned on working with Chu Lai King to attack the hidden sword peak, but their reactions were slightly slower. Seeing this, they completely stopped worrying and prepared to defend the monastery firmly. But suddenly, the hidden sword peak that was on the brink of collapse rapidly expanded. Blood sacrificed to the sword. Elder Tian brought his palms together, and his clothes scattered, reduced to dust. His skin tore apart as well, and blood sprayed out, merging with the hidden sword peak beneath his feet. The hidden sword peak immediately stabilized. However, Elder Tian did not have any skin on him at all, revealing his flesh and blood. His original appearance was no longer recognizable. He was like a demon that had crawled out of a pool of blood in hell. This was the sorrow of being a sword slave. He had to sacrifice everything for the sword soul at any time. Myriad swords returned to the root. Elder Tian stood on his feet and stabbed his hand viciously into the hidden sword peak, like he was holding a huge sword. The thousands of swords flew back, and the sword formation of heaven and earth suddenly shrank, operating violently. The hidden sword peak forcefully protruded from the painting, falling rapidly towards Great Buddha Mountain. The four monk kings received it together, but the extremely weakened sound of Sanskrit formation of world purification only lasted for a split second before completely collapsing. Faced with this terrifying sight that resembled a natural disaster, their instincts told them to immediately avoid it, or they would be dead for sure. However, the Chan monastery of Devanaga's foundation that had existed for tens of thousands of years was right under their feet. The hidden sword peak had directly smashed into it, and the entire mountain was about to collapse, and all of the disciples would die to the landslide. As a result, none of the four of them moved at all. The dauntless monk said, "I will die for the monastery today. Live up to my Zen heart. Live up to my Buddha." The three monk kings chanted, "Live up to my Zen heart. Live up to my Buddha." With a flash of golden light, the 4 monk kings all turned into Vajras that were several hundred meters tall, raising their arms high into the air to receive the hidden sword peak. Boom! There was a great rumble, but it was not as violent as they imagined it to be. 2 black pillars stood beside them. Looking up from the pillars, they saw a towering ox demon, using its shoulders to shoulder the entire hidden sword peak. Qingshan, the unraging monk, said, "Why aren't you leaving yet?" Li Qingshan grinned, and his bones crackled. Even after transforming into the ox demon transformation and unleashing the various abilities of the ox demon, he struggled to contend against the pressure of the hidden sword peak. The bones in his arms shattered, and his spine bent and snapped. His flesh and blood went without saying, mixing with the soil and rock of the hidden sword peak and turning into surging flames. However, he hooked his horns into the mountain and held on firmly. His hooves sank deep into the mountain, and the head of the Buddha cracked and collapsed. The dauntless monk was moved. He said sternly, "We all owe you our lives." Afterwards, he ordered loudly, "All disciples, listen up. Retreat from Great Buddha Mountain as soon as possible." Although they were reluctant to admit it, it was already difficult for them to interfere in this battle. There was basically an entire realm of cultivation difference between them and the hidden sword peak. Only supreme experts, like the Dragon King of the Sea, who had reached the peak of the 3rd heavenly tribulation, could work together and contend against one of them. Everyone else would just be throwing their lives away if they tried. "You stinking bug, watch as I crush you," Elder Tian said, but it was no longer his voice. Instead, it was the roars of the entire hidden sword peak. Rumble! Li Qingshan's colossal body was almost pressed into Great Buddha Mountain. A series of sounds of bones shattering rang out from his body, but his expression became even more determined. He said sternly, "Come." With a dragon's roar, the ink cloud surged and gathered beside Li Qingshan, lifting up the hidden sword peak together. The Dragon King of the Sea flew up and wrapped around Great Buddha Mountain. Reversal of the 5 elements. Chu Lai King stepped onto the hidden sword peak with a single step and sent a palm strike towards Elder Tian. Elder Tian stabbed one hand into the hidden sword peak and formed a seal with the other. Although he did not have a sword in his hand, he seemed to hold the entire realm of swords in his hand. Sword and palm clashed over 1,000 times in a single instant. Even though his posture was strange and he could not move his body, he actually did not lose the upper hand at all. The shock waves kicked up a storm. A colossal ink dragon head rose up from the east of the hidden sword peak, lunging over. Elder Tian pointed his sword at Chu Lai King. His right leg twisted at an odd angle and stepped hard on the dragon head. The dragon head suddenly turned into a human figure. It was the Mo Wuhan that Li Qingshan had seen before. He waved his sleeves elegantly and slashed down with his sword. Clang! With the sound of metal clashing, the flesh and blood of Elder Tian's right leg fell off. His leg bone turned into a blade and blocked the blade. His left leg did the same. It stretched out, and a flash of sword light flashed. The magnificent red light shot by Crimson Dragon King was split into 2. Its angle changed accordingly, and it attacked Chu Lai King and the Dragon King of the Sea respectively. Chu Lai King struck out with his palm. The void in front of him twisted, and the red light deviated, flying towards the horizon. Dragon King of Ink Sea's body floated like ink as he dodged the scarlet light calmly. Behind him, there was a loud explosion dozens of miles away, and a mushroom cloud rose into the sky. The ring-shaped airwave overturned a group of retreating monks. The 4 monk kings could not hide their astonishment. This swordsmanship was unbelievable. Just now, their defeat in one move was not a coincidence. It could even be said that they were lucky. Twisted and strange laughter came from the hidden sword peak. It was angry, happy, hateful, and malicious, like the hysterical laughter of a madman. It was full of chaos and was difficult to distinguish, but the effect was like a devil's voice. The monks fell to the ground, holding their heads and crying. The monk kings hurriedly performed the chant of Devanaga to save their disciples from dying. Amidst the storm, Elder Tion, who had lost his human form, was fighting one against three peerless experts. Illusions intertwined, changing and blurring. Sometimes it was a magnificent picture. Sometimes it was the Green Province, but it could not completely annihilate the heaven and earth sword realm. With the help of the Dragon King of the Sea and Chu Lai King, Li Qingshan felt much lighter, but it was only relatively speaking. The hidden sword peak was still pressing down on him, making him almost unable to move. It was devouring his flesh and bones. His arms had almost become a pile of mud, and he was relying on his body to support himself. No matter how strong the helpers were, it was useless if his own cultivation was not enough. However, he had never been someone who relied on others. Mu. Li Qingshan lowered his head and sucked in a deep breath. He let out a deep moo and slammed his ox head against the sword collection peak viciously. Elder Tion's eyes widened. He did not expect that he still had the strength to fight back in this situation, and the counterattack was so strong and reckless. Boom! With an earth-shattering sound, the hidden sword peak suddenly shattered. A wave of air swept out for thousands of miles, and thousands of boulders were shot out like rain. Li Qingshan's skull was shattered, and blood flowed out, turning into flames that burned fiercely. It was as if his fighting spirit had never been extinguished. He stepped on the half-collapsed Great Buddha Mountain, straightened his body, and roared angrily, "Come and crush me!" The monks looked at the distant Great Buddha Mountain, and for a moment they could not control their emotions. Chu Lai King and Dragon King of the Sea looked at each other, and both had the meaning of "as expected." Chapter 11:15. The destructive power of the hidden sword peak swept away the dark clouds, and a ray of sunlight fell on Li Qingshan's body. He stared at the sky and muttered, "Let me see your true face." An extremely strange sword floated in the sky. The hilt of the sword was uneven, and the body of the sword was twisted and bent. If it wasn't for the ghastly sword chi, it would be practically impossible to determine that this was a sword. It was like a piece of trash that had failed to be refined in a cauldron, and it caused one to feel uncomfortable no matter how one looked at it, causing one to involuntarily feel a sense of disgust and rejection. However, it was this sword that controlled the heaven and earth sword realm, operated the heaven and earth sword matrix, and enslaved Elder Tion. No other weapon in the 9 states could compare to it. Li Qingshan suddenly realized that the towering hidden sword peak was merely its scabbard. The battle was not over yet. Perhaps this was just the beginning. The swords fell like rain, the long swords that formed the sword formation of heaven, and earth fell from the sky, but they did not attack. Instead, they were abandoned like garbage. Controlling these pieces of trash is really a waste of effort. Elder Tion used his remaining hand to hold the hilt of the sword. His body twisted and became more and more deformed, as if he was an artifact attached to the sword. He was only used to adapt to the shape of the sword and unleash the power of the sword. And that old man's bullshit realm? Get out of my way. Elder Tion waved his sword randomly. The heaven and earth sword realm, which had not collapsed even under the joint suppression of Chu Lai King and the Dragon King of the Sea, was instantly destroyed. Sword peak, sword formation, sword realm. All external objects were abandoned, leaving only a man and a sword standing tall in the sky. Or rather, there was only one sword, a sword that immortals despised. However, Li Qingshan, Chu Lai King, and the Dragon King of the Sea all clearly felt that it was more of a threat than ever before. However, they were not afraid at all. If the three of them could not deal with a lone sword together, it would be the biggest joke in the world. It might be able to gain the upper hand for a while, but it would not be able to win in the end. I have to admit, according to this world's standards, this world is too small. You are all very strong. If this was any other place, it would be quite troublesome. Unfortunately, this was the great Buddha Mountain. He saw the Forsaken Fairy's sword gradually
You have no
thin out
chance of winning.
and disperse
All
in
right,
the Qingzhou
the game ends
cauldron.
here.
It was actually
Now,
just a sword illusion.
I will destroy
Not
the demon
only did the
suppression
Forsaken
hall.
Fairy sword possess the
Elder
special
Tian,
ability to submerge into
as
space,
she spoke,
but it had
she suddenly
even
became
fooled
more
the spirit
reasonable.
turtle's
Her
divination.
body gradually
Oh, no.
melted,
Li Qingshan
merging
looked
into the
back,
Forsaken
and the
immortal
Forsaken
sword
Fairy
in her
sword
hand.
emerged from
She
space.
was swallowed up
It
by the
turned
sword,
into a
leaving
twisted
behind
streak
only
of
a
light,
head.
and
With a
disappeared
sinister
into the
laugh,
demon suppression
she disappeared
hall.
into the
Now,
horizon,
all he could do was hope
submerging
that the
into the
demon
void.
suppression hall
From this
was tough
moment
enough to
onwards,
block the attack,
the existence
slightly,
of Elder Tian
giving them a second
no longer
opportunity to
existed
strike
in this world.
However,
The abandoned
things did
immortal
not go
sword's
according to
soul
plan.
used
A
the
crack
power it gained
suddenly
from devouring
appeared
the sword
at the
slaves
top
to
of
launch
the
a
demon
counterattack.
suppression hall.
Li
In
Qingshan
terms
was
of
already
toughness,
prepared.
the demon suppression
His
hall
eyes
was
suddenly
even
became
tougher
as
than
deep
the
as
Hall
the
of
sea,
Great Strength in the
and
past.
he punched the void
or it would have been
beside him.
impossible for
Come
it to
out.
imprison the town
The
of
void
myriad demons
trembled
and
violently,
suppress the demon
and the
cavern.
Forsaken Fairy
However,
sword could be
under the
vaguely
Forsaken
seen within
Fairy
it.
sword,
A black
it
line
actually
swam
seemed as
over
fragile
and wrapped
as a
around
regular
the sword,
building.
pulling it
Li
out of the
Qingshan
void.
shook his head.
It was the
This
Dragon
situation
King
was
of the
not
sea.
particularly
Without
unexpected.
waiting for the
He
Forsaken
said to
Fairy
Chu
sword
Lai
to
King,
react,
and the
Chu Lai
Dragon
King
King of the Sea beside
slammed
him,
the
prepare
Qingzhou
to
cauldron
suppress the
down.
demon cavern
It's
again.
finally over. Chu Lai King
The dauntless
and the
monk
Dragon
watched
King
this
of the sea
and
said
let out a
nothing.
great sigh of
They
relief.
had prepared
Inside,
themselves for the
the
worst
Chan
case scenario
monastery
to
of
a certain
Devanaga
extent.
had finally
After
survived
all,
another
the enemy was
disaster.
so powerful.
Illusion. Defeating
The
them
Dragon
was
King
already
of the sea
extremely
flew
difficult.
out of the Qingzhou
Stopping them
cauldron,
from fleeing
and
or
said
destroying
two
them was
words.
basically impossible.
Chu Lai King frowned.
However, while the destruction of the demon suppression hall was terrible, killing a few demon kings was still nothing difficult for the three of them if they worked together. They wanted to see who was bold enough to stand up for them. Afterwards, they would just have to use the god artifact that was the Qingzhou cauldron to suppress them again. Rumble! The crack rapidly spread across the entire demon suppression hall. Demon chi gushed out from the cracks. The vegetation in the surroundings either withered or began to demonify. The demon suppression hall was gradually buried in the surging demon chi. With a great rumble, demon chi rushed into the air and rapidly expanded, reaching several dozen kilometers away and darkening the surroundings. Li Qingshan raised an eyebrow. The size of the demon cavern was truly unprecedented. He struggled to imagine how the Chan monastery of Devanaga had managed to suppress it in the past without the Green Province cauldron. An extremely clear black hole appeared in the Green Province cauldron in Chu Lai King's hand. He was stern as he raised the cauldron high. "Fellow cultivators, please assist me." Before they could answer, he leapt into the Green Province cauldron. The cauldron flew towards the demon cavern and swelled in the wind, growing larger and larger. The mountains and rivers on it became clearer and clearer, and it also became more and more solemn. It forcefully blocked the surging demon chi and slowly pressed down. Li Qingshan and the Dragon King of the Sea arrived before the demon cavern. They were prepared to kill all who stood in their way, but they also had to guard against the forsaken immortal sword trying to interfere again. However, after waiting for a while, the forsaken immortal sword did not launch a sneak attack. Instead, powerful auras surged over from the demon cavern. Every single aura was that of a demon king. That's a little big. Li Qingshan raised an eyebrow. The demon kings attacking them were not just 3 or 5, nor were they 8 or 10. Instead, there were several dozen, reaching the maximum number of demon kings that could pass through at the same time in the demon cavern. The demon domain must have been prepared a long time ago, gathering the demon kings together. They would launch an attack as soon as the demon suppression hall fell. And these demon kings did not swarm over. Instead, they stood in a simple battle formation. Anyone with a slight understanding of the demon domain would know that it was basically impossible for 2 demon kings to coexist peacefully. If several dozen demon kings gathered together, it would devolve into a chaotic battle very soon. This was determined by the nature of demon folk and the laws of the demon domain. This was a world without trust and filled with malice. Unless there were even more powerful demon folk commanding them and using absolute strength to suppress them, they could not achieve this. Li Qingshan could not help but think of the terrifying sword chi that could annihilate everything in the demon cavern of the south. Chapter 11:16. Clear River Prefecture, the pillar of lightning pierced through the surroundings. The swarm of insects surged into the pillar of light like moths to a flame, one after another. They surged endlessly. Gu Yenying swung her jade folding fan, and 100 tornadoes swept through the swarm of insects. But they struggled to kill the locusts so easily. Suddenly, her heart shivered. The soaring locust king vanished from her vision. She swung her jade, folding fan backwards, and sharp atmospheric winds whistled out along with the scorching winds of hell. You sure have some reactions, but those who stand in my way will die. War Demon's Possession. The soaring locust king suddenly appeared, flapping a pair of insect wings as startling demon chi erupted from its body. It donned a set of demonic armor, and the banner on its back bore the 2 words, War Demon. It sped up once again, advancing instead of retreating. It flew against the wind and lunged towards Gu Yenying. Gu Yenying raised an eyebrow, and a pair of strong, white hawk wings unfurled on her back. She assumed a half-demon form and flew backwards. She called out, Li Qingshan! He's here. Li Qingshan shot through the air and threw a punch at the soaring locust king. His main body was currently focused on fending off the sword collection peak, so his control over his mirror clone was slightly weaker. Seeing the soaring Locust King actually unleash the war demon's possession, he was surprised. As expected, he's seen through it. Even without the spirit turtle's ability to calculate, the soaring Locust King had managed to understand the true form of the demon suppression statuary after such a long period of time with his cultivation as a great demon king, making up for his greatest shortcoming. However, to Li Qingshan, this was the greatest piece of bad news. It meant that his strategy of decapitating the leader was no longer possible. Die! The soaring Locust King flapped its wings, and there was a flash of light as sharp as a blade. A huge gash appeared on Li Qingshan's chest, but it was not flesh. Instead, it was changing, flowing water. Soon afterwards, there was another flash of light. All he could do was retreat and focus on recovering from his wounds. It was all thanks to Gu Yenying's assistance that his mirror clone was not completely destroyed. Scarlet, white, and black wings flew about, sometimes crisscrossing and sometimes separating. For a moment, he was surrounded by danger. Li Qingshan looked down from the corner of his eyes and saw that no one was controlling the tornado. Amidst the surging pests, in the blink of an eye, it collapsed and dissipated. The swarm of insects surged into the lightning without any obstruction, and the tribulation lightning became even more violent. No, this can't go on. The mirror avatar's strength was still too weak. He could easily deal with ordinary demon kings. It was already beyond his ability to deal with a great demon monarch. If this continued, he could only watch as the Golden Cicada Spirit King was struck to death by lightning. Damn it! Both sides are so hard to deal with. Useless! Useless! The flying Locust King laughed maniacally. Like a bolt of black lightning, it flew across the sky, fighting one against two. From time to time, it would summon the swarm of locusts to help. Li Qingshan and Gu Yenying could barely protect themselves. They could not stop it at all. The source of the locust plague, the flying Locust King, is here. Do you want to keep watching? Gu Yenying called out. Wuyang and Jin Fugue exchanged glances. They had always been thinking of a way to kill the flying Locust King. Now was indeed the best opportunity. Originally, they wanted to wait for the flying Locust King and the Golden Cicada Spirit King to tire themselves out before reaping the benefits. However, after witnessing the flying Locust King's strength after demonification, they could not help but admit that if the flying Locust King wanted to flee, they could not stop it at all, so they no longer hesitated. Black Cloud Sand Prison. Total annihilation. With the cry of a phoenix, the phoenix soared over and called out, "First Father, I'll help you." Helicoverp Rosa stood on the little phoenix's back and spat out thousands of strands of spider silk from her mouth. Great Buddha Mountain, demon chi surged into the air like a beacon. The situation had taken a turn for the worse. Their enemy was no longer a single person or a single sword, but the boundless demon domain. Behind the several dozen demon kings, there were probably even more demon folk armies. In the past, whenever the demon domain invaded, they would have to gather the strength of the 9 provinces to fend them off. This was a war between two worlds. The effects of an individual would be drastically reduced. Even though Li Qingshan and the others were peak masters, they struggled to stop the war from erupting. The unraging monk clenched his fist firmly and gazed at Great Buddha Mountain that had been swallowed by the demon chi. He seemed to see the murals of Buddhas dimming and peeling away, and the scriptures engraved on the stone tablets gradually blurring. His eyes became slightly moist. The Buddha nature and Buddha light hidden in the mountains, rocks, and plants were completely washed away. Even if the Devil's Den was suppressed again, it would probably take 1,000 years to completely restore it to its original state. And before long, even the spirit veins would be contaminated. The Chan monastery of Devanaga has been destroyed. A certain monk let out a sorrowful cry, and the monks all shed tears, some even breaking down and wailing. For a moment, there were wails everywhere. To them, the Chan monastery of Devanaga was basically their home. To mortals, no matter how great their mental fortitude and cultivation were, they could not help but feel agitated right now. They struggled to control themselves. As the abbot, Dauntless has failed to protect the monastery. I've failed my predecessors. Even 10,000 deaths cannot atone for my sins. The dauntless monk knelt down in the direction of Great Buddha Mountain. The Chan monastery of Devanaga had actually been destroyed in his hands. There's no need to blame yourself too much, senior brother. Since the demon domain is determined to invade, there's nothing anyone can do. The unraging monk advised. He was also extremely sorrowful and furious, but he had been mentally prepared a long time ago after watching over the demon suppression hall for all these years. He had even predicted this would happen, as the Chan monastery of Devanaga had always been built on the crater of a volcano. The world had been at peace for several millennia. To the disciples of the Chan monastery of Devanaga, demon folk were merely tools for tempering themselves. It was very easy for them to overlook the strength of the demon domain, as well as the fact that the demon cavern had been a passageway the demon domain had opened up to attack in the first place. The demon cavern behind Great Buddha Mountain was so large that even with the suppression of the demon suppression hall, it was still much easier than opening up a new demon cavern. It was like a war between two countries. The Chan monastery of Devanaga was only equivalent to a sturdy city on the outskirts. Even without the sword collection peak opening the city gates as spies, they would struggle to fend off the large-scale attack of the demon domain. In the past wars, just how many extremely powerful divine kingdoms of other folk had been destroyed in the demon plague in the end. In terms of both history and strength, these divine kingdoms were probably no weaker than the Chan monastery of Devanaga. Let alone the Chan monastery of Devanaga, probably the entire world of the 9 provinces was just a sturdy city to the demon domain. Fellow cultivators, please assist me in killing the demons and do your best to suppress the demon cavern. I will definitely repay you handsomely in the future. Chu Lai King's sincerity was almost humble. In a situation like this, anyone could back down. But as the king of Chu, he had inherited the dying will of the previous kings. He had the responsibility of guarding the land, so he could not back down. Even if he knew it was impossible, he still had to do his best. Neither the Dragon King of the Sea nor Li Qingshan answered. Chu Lai King's heart sank. Without their help, there really was no point in trying. The Dragon King of the Sea reverted to his dragon form and circled around the demon cavern. He drew over the inky clouds in the sky and gathered them towards the demon cavern, suppressing the surging demon chi and assisting Chu Lai King in suppressing the demon cavern. Li Qingshan reverted to his normal form and murmured, "War demon possession," before stepping into the surging demon chi. He swung his dying blossom blade and prepared to deal with the upcoming battle. At the same time, he saw the sight of the Clear River Prefecture through his mirror clone. His heart became heavier and heavier. Although everyone worked together to keep the soaring Locust King at bay, they still struggled to stop the soaring Locust King's frenzied vengeance, just like how they struggled to stop the Forsaken Immortal Sword from destroying the Demon Suppression Hall. The situation on both sides became worse and worse simultaneously. Chapter 11:17. Little and come to Great Buddha Mountain to help. Li Qingshan's voice came intermittently from the communication jade token. Little and thought for a moment, and then put it away, without shattering it. She was surrounded by mist that was the color of a deathly gray. It was extremely thick, and seemed to weigh down on her. It seeped into her body through every pore, into her mind, and caused her to feel oppressive despair. Little Anne's expression was silent, without joy or sorrow. Her clear eyes pierced through the thick mist, but were blocked by an invisible barrier. This place did not seem to belong to the 9 provinces, and had been thrown to the edge of the world. If one looked down from an extremely high altitude, the 10,000 Ghosts Abyss would be enveloped in a hemispherical shape. It was filled with thick mist, as if there was an invisible monster swallowing the entire 10,000 Ghosts Abyss, and then slowly digesting it. All of this had to start from the moment she inserted the key into the gate of hungry ghosts. When she turned the key, wanting to draw in some ghouls to use as resources for cultivation, the gate of hungry ghosts suddenly expanded, turning into a sphere that swallowed the entire 10,000 Ghosts Abyss. She had experienced the Battle of Burial Mound Mountain and knew that this region was being swallowed by the hungry ghost realm. The enemy was much stronger than the Corpse King, which was why the gate of hungry ghosts could expand to such an extent in an instant. She had no time to react, and after the gate of hungry ghosts expanded to cover the entire 10,000 Ghosts Abyss, it stopped expanding and instead started to shrink. This proved that the attacker was definitely targeting her. The fundamental law of the hungry ghost realm was swallowing. With the power of this gate of hungry ghosts, it could swallow a region 100 times larger, or have countless ghouls swarm into this world. But it did not happen. Up until now, she had not seen a single little ghost. There was only the soundless thick mist. Even though she did not know who was behind this, she knew that she had fallen into a trap. He also knew that he had fallen into a trap, and it must be related to Elder Ming, who had escaped. When this region was completely swallowed, she would fall into the hungry ghost realm. With her identity as the heir of the White Bone, what awaited her would be a warm welcome. Such a hopeless situation. It was enough to drive one mad. Dressed in white, I was once the sect around in the leader of the returning to her original spot, and sitting down and interrupted. She fiddled with the skull prayer beads, the sect and leader silently chanted scriptures. Behind her smiled was the towering previous sect leader had already agreed to abdicate a chill and pass the position to her, and so she could be considered the last sect leader of the Xianing. Aren't you going to try to escape? Ha 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 ha! How little funny! And said, "I can consider sparing your life." Such frank why don't we words make a deal? Seemed to stun the owner of the legacy of White Bone, not knowing how to continue. I will. Interesting. Liar, as expected of the successor of White Bone. You are indeed, don't interrupt me. Very interesting. The drifting whisper, the destruction suddenly of the turned into a furious in your roar hands that filled the valley. In vain. The whistling and wind lifted up little Anne's long hair. Don't you want to know who I am, the crimson blood and what relationship I have with the mysterious dark sect? Don't you want to know what will happen to you as the ghost abyss in the hungry ghost swallowed into the hungry ghost realm? A face emerged the power from the thick fog. The other party circling around grow stronger and stronger. Sometimes it was once a man. He entered the hungry ghost realm. Sometimes it was a woman. He would probably have to face an existence. Sometimes it was a child by two and major their expressions were filled with no matter how the path of White Bone and others to shudder with countered the ghouls. Little he would not be able to win and shook his head. Sorry, slightly. Qingshan, very well. I won't be able to go to great you have accepted your fate. He gripped in the thick fog, looked down at her tightly, little, and let out a soft, wait a little longer. I need to grasp his expression or his state of mind. The gate of hungry ghosts gradually shrank. He was in despair, and the aura from the hungry ghost realm grew thicker and thicker. He could vaguely hear the wails of 10,000 ghosts, rolling demonic or surged over. The battle formation formed by several dozen demon kings rapidly approached. Li Qingshan could already see the strange faces clearly. Li Qingshan closed his eyes. The blade in his hand danced around lightly before he suddenly opened his eyes. Scarlet light shot out, and he swung his blade. Like a blossoming flower, it turned into 1,000 blade flashes and slashed towards the group of demons. The Dragon King of the Sea was slightly surprised. Although the force of the blade was fierce, he had attacked too early. This kind of mistake was not like him. The demon kings laughed wildly. Could it be that this guy was scared out of his wits? However, when some of the demon kings looked at the crimson-haired and crimson-eyed voice, they seemed to realize something. They could not help but shrink back. Wherever the blade flashes past, crisscrossing black blade marks were left behind, shattering the void in an instant. The laughter came to a sudden halt. The demon kings could not react in time and crashed into it. The bodies of the dozen or so demon kings at the very front were immediately shattered into dozens or even hundreds of pieces. The other demon kings hurriedly used various methods to dodge. The battle formation was immediately thrown into chaos. One of them cried out, "It's North Moon!" This was a name that had been mentioned many times before they set off. He was one of the many experts of the world of the 9 provinces, and he was even more dangerous than the 10 demon kings and the dukes of the 8 provinces. It was precisely because of his powerful ability to shatter the void that he was extremely destructive to the demon cavern. Good. The Dragon King of the Sea could not help but praise as well. He flew into the demon cavern and shrank his body to just a few feet, wandering through the cracks in space. Although the bodies of the dozen or so unlucky demon kings had been sliced to pieces, not a single one of them actually died due to the strange life force of demon folk. They pieced their shattered bodies together desperately, and a streak of ink flew through the air, leaving behind a winding trajectory and piercing the hearts of the demon kings one by one. Boom, boom, boom. The might of the explosion of 7 or 8 demon hearts immediately swept through the entire demon cavern. The surging demon chi was also severed. Chu Lai King used this opportunity to smash down viciously with the Green Province cauldron. Li Qingshan exhaled. Although he was not as good as Little, and his 2 teammates were quite impressive, however, he also felt deeply exhausted. Just now, fighting the forsaken immortal sword had already taken quite the toll on him. Swinging the blade like that was quite difficult either. If he wanted to continue fighting, he could only consider rebirth. However, he already wanted to retreat. The opportunity to stop the demon folks' invasion was not great, so he was better off returning to the Clear River Prefecture to deal with the soaring Locust King. And he was very worried about Little Anne's safety. He was eager to check out the Myriad Ghosts' abyss. Just as he hesitated, a golden line shot through the sky, turning into a vine in the blink of an eye and wrapping around the Green Province cauldron, trying to drag it away forcefully. Chapter 11:18. Dark Moon. Dark Moon. The Dark Queen called out frantically. She wanted to rush into the Myriad Ghosts' abyss desperately, but no matter what she did, she was unable to get through the invisible barrier. A streak of resplendent silver light rushed out of the southern horizon, flying over like a sharp sword. The Dark Queen suddenly looked back. The Silver Dragon King, the King of Southern Yu, stood on the bridge and gazed at the land of the Green Province. He felt rather excited inside. Behind him were the esteemed guests of the king's estate. They had gathered all the strength of the kingdom of Yu to wage war against the kingdom of Chu. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat. He sensed the Dark Queen's aura. Afterwards, the esteemed guests sensed it too. They all said, "It's the Dark Queen, and she's all alone. What a good omen. Let's go take her down." Killing her is easy, but her identity is anything but trivial. We've already declared war against the kingdom of Chu, so why should we be afraid of Chu Lai King? I'm not talking about her man, but her daughter. Her daughter. The esteemed guests all fell silent. Everyone already knew about the destruction of the Umbral Een sect. It was rumored to be the Dark Queen's daughter, Princess Dark Moon. Originally, they were rather doubtful, but before they set off, the King of Southern Yu had once emphasized this matter. they had to avoid conflict with two people as much as possible, one of which was Li Qingshan, while the other was this Princess Dark Moon. The Silver Dragon King rapidly approached. The Dark Queen gritted her teeth secretly, but she refused to abandon Little. And then what do? Are we supposed to spare her? Strange. Why isn't she fleeing? Something seems to have happened to the umbral insect. Don't tell me it's the Gate of Hungry Ghosts. Through the mechanisms on the Silver Dragon King, the King of Southern you had noticed the abnormalities in the myriad ghosts abyss a long time ago. He guessed it was related to the Gate of Hungry Ghosts, and according to the information, Little and was currently cultivating in the myriad ghosts abyss. The Dark Queen's abnormal actions proved this as well. Head caretaker Gong Yang bowed and said softly, "Your Majesty, even the heavens are helping me." The King of Southern, you said nothing in thought. The only people he feared were Li Qingshan and Little, and, in fact, in his eyes, Chu Lai King had already lost the upper hand and would definitely not be able to resist his army. As for Little, and his fear was even deeper. After all, she was Princess Xianyu, the only successor to the throne of Chu. Moreover, once she made a move, Li Qingshan would definitely not stand idly by. Now he allowed Little and to be devoured by the hungry ghost realm. It was tantamount to eliminating the biggest hidden danger. The heavens were really on his side. However, he had a deeper concern. If Li Qingshan found out that he didn't help, who knew what kind of reaction he would have? He could not help but laugh self-mockingly. As the ruler of a country, destroying a country was nothing to him. But now he had to be so apprehensive about one person. However, when he thought of Li Qingshan's enraged look, he had no choice but to be cautious. With a thought, Xiao Chun seemed to think of something, and he made a decision. He flung his sleeves, and the Silver Dragon King's main cannon shot out. Specks of silver light began to gather in the Dark Queen's eyes. The silver light in the Dark Queen's eyes grew brighter and brighter. Suddenly, with a flash, resplendent silver light whistled over, but it passed over her head and struck the invisible barrier that enveloped the myriad ghosts abyss behind her, producing countless silver ripples. "Your Majesty?" Caretaker Ram was taken aback. "She's already severed her ties with Chu Lai King. She's not our enemy, and she even helped me destroy the Chan Monastery of Devanaga and destroy the Umbraline sect, so I should obviously assist her in breaking free. Don't you dare say anything else." The King of Southern, you said, righteously. The officials behind him looked at one another. That was not the theory that prevailed in the Mist Province. Instead, it was the law of survival of the fittest. However, since the King of Southern you had already said that, they could only accept this explanation. If it were in the past, perhaps there would still be people who refused to accept this, but after the King of Southern you obtained the Great Banyan Tree King's support, his organization in the Mist Province had already flourished. No one could oppose him. "Yes, I've been too short-sighted," head caretaker Ram said in thought. The King of Southern you drove the Silver Dragon King, and the silver light constantly bombarded the invisible barrier. As the greatest weapon for attacking cities in the world, even the invisible domain the Gate of Hungry Ghosts had conjured could not put up a complete resistance. It began to show signs of melting. The reason why he made this decision was because he recalled the warning the Banyan Tree King had given him before he set off. "If Li Qingshan is determined to stop you from destroying the kingdom of Chu, don't force him. You can only be a friend, not an enemy." He had always admired the Banyan Tree King's wisdom. Now that he had become the god of the Mist Province, his plans went even further. As a result, he suddenly discovered that saving or not saving was a choice between being a friend or an enemy. As a result, he resolutely chose being a friend. At this moment, the Gate of Hungry Ghosts sped up. The King of Southern you frowned, and turned his face to the officials. Officials, this is our first battle in the Green Province. Let me witness what you're capable of. The officials accepted the order and flew out of the Silver Dragon King as streaks of light, unleashing their various techniques towards the myriad ghosts' abyss. I've already done everything I can. Whether I can escape or not will be up to you. Having made his choice, the King of Southern Yu eased up. Now that he had gone so far, he believed that even if Li Qingshan was unwilling to help him, he would not be determined to stop him, right? Little and suddenly raised her head. All she saw was a silver star growing brighter and brighter. A sliver of silver light shot in. She let go of the jade talisman in her hand. Looks like there's no need for that. She smiled. That works too. The surrounding domain rapidly shrank, and the hungry ghost realm was already right before her. She stood up gently and flew up. You want to leave? With a roar, the mist-like aura of death suddenly surged, turning into Emperor Li's ever-changing face and trying to devour her. The Buddha slaying sword appeared. This was the moment Little and had been waiting for. If you don't show yourself, then so be it, but you actually dare to condense a clone. So don't blame me for being merciless. Arg! With a cry of pain, the face condensed from the aura of death collapsed. With a swing of the Buddha's slaying sword. Who could stop it? Even if you were some Emperor Li in the hungry ghost realm, this was the 9 provinces. Little and looked back with a smile and said loudly, Emperor Li, I'll give you the legacy of the white bone. Thank you for sparing my life. We'll meet again. With that, he swung the blood sea banner towards the resplendent silver light. How dare you? Who are you? Chu Lai King flew into a rage. He slammed his palm against the golden vine, but the force from his palm was like a clay ox that had disappeared into the ocean. It was not very effective. The golden vine rapidly spread out, enveloping the entire Green Province cauldron. Madam Tung, now is not the time for you to take the cauldron. Li Qingshan knew that Madam Tung possessed extraordinary talent. She could devour spiritual force and possessed supreme vitality and defenses. Striking at a time like this was basically the final iron rod that broke the camel's back. Now is not the time? When is the time? If you won't help me, don't even think about stopping me. Madame Tung said, ever since she came to the Green Province, she had been searching for an opportunity to steal the Green Province cauldron. However, the cauldron was not that easy to steal, and there was no chance of success if she tried to steal it openly. Now that she had come across this heaven-sent opportunity, she definitely would not let it go. The Green Province cauldron shook violently. As the golden vine tightened and spread, the illusion of the Green Province rapidly collapsed and shrank. Meanwhile, demon chi surged upwards. Chu Lai King was already exhausted from the intense battle with the forsaken immortal Sword Soul. Now that he had to suppress the demon cauldron, he was being attacked from both sides. He immediately felt like he was losing control of the cauldron. All right, do whatever you want. Li Qingshan glanced at the demon cauldron. The spatial crack gradually closed up, and demon chi surged in the depths of the cauldron. Who knew how many demon folk were ready to strike? The demon cauldron was far too large. The tremors were powerful, but they could not seal up such a large gap. At a time like this, even if he chased Madame Tung away, he would not be able to stop the invasion of the demon domain. He sighed and laid out his hands. Right when he was about to apologize, the communication jade talisman in his bosom suddenly lit up, and Little N's voice rang out. Qingshan, I'm fine now. I'll come to Great Buddha Mountain right now. Li Qingshan laughed aloud and pointed at Madame Tung in the air. Put down the cauldron right now. Little N passed through the silver light and looked back at the rapidly shrinking myriad ghosts abyss. Madame Tung
secretly
obviously would
rejoiced
not listen
that
to Li
Emperor
Qingshan's
Li
orders, but
had
she had to
preserved his
treat
strength.
it seriously.
Xianyue,
She called out.
the Dark
Li
Queen said,
Qingshan,
happily,
don't forget about what
I'm
you
fine.
promised someone else.
I've made Mother worry.
Did you steal
Come
the
with
cauldron
me.
for the banyan
Little
tree king?
and comforted the
Li
Dark
Qingshan
Queen
asked
before
clasping
I
his
of course
hands at
not.
the silver dragon
Madame
king
Tung
in the
changed
air.
the topic
Thank
and
you,
denied it
Your
firmly.
Majesty.
It was
the
impossible
king of
for
you.
her to admit
We can't stay
that she
here
had
for
traveled
long. all the way to the
Afterwards,
Green Province.
he turned
for
into
that
a white
heartless
blur
old
and flew
tree
off
demon.
towards the north.
She had already
the Dark
thought about
Queen
it a
followed
long
close
time
behind.
ago. Once
We
she
can't stay
obtained
here
the
for
Green
long.
Province
The
cauldron,
King of Southern
she
you
would
gazed
only
down.
give it to him.
The gate
when
of
he begged
hungry
her.
ghosts had shrunk
Then there's
to
no
less than a few
someone else.
kilometers,
Li
but it
Qingshan
swallowed the
smiled
entire myriad
and said
ghosts
seriously,
abyss.
All right,
It
I'll
seemed
naturally hand the 9
twisted
cauldrons to the
and
banyan
strange.
tree king in the future.
But very soon,
the time
it
isn't
expanded
right now.
once again.
You better put down the
swallowing
cauldron
several
obediently,
hundred kilometers
or
in the blink
else
of an eye.
Demon
Without
Chi
another
surged
word.
over from
He
behind.
immediately
A
steered
demon
the
king
silver dragon
leapt
king
out of
away.
the demon
Little
cauldron
and flew
first.
over 1,000
After
kilometers
demonifying,
away.
it
Looking
resembled
back,
a tadpole.
he saw a surging
but
Yin Chi
who knew how many
that
times
shrouded the
larger
sky
than a
He
tadpole?
thought, sure enough, its entire body was snow white, and it had no eyes, ears, mouth, or nose. It gave off an intense stench. A tiny, spiky tail swayed rapidly, creating ripples in the air. It moved startlingly quickly, and its huge, sleek head suddenly split open into a blood-red gash that resembled a mouth. It swallowed Li Qingshan in a single gulp, and the gash immediately closed up. Or what? Madame Tung smiled. She wrapped her arms around the Green Province cauldron firmly, pulling it back as hard as she could. Chu Lai King was no weakling either. As the Lord of the Green Province, he was the natural possessor of the Green Province cauldron. This connection could not be severed so easily, so he continued to hold onto the cauldron as hard as he could. When he heard the conversation between Li Qingshan and Madame Tung, he became even more afraid of relaxing. He questioned, "You were sent by the Banyan Tree King?" No matter how peaceful and neutral the Banyan Tree King was, he still represented the Mist Province, and he had close ties with the King of Southern Yu. They seemed to be working together. Right now, the strength of the Green Province and the Mist Province had completely lost balance. Once they lost the Green Province cauldron, the Banyan Tree King would become the god of the Green Province. By then, the fate of the Chu Kingdom would be in his hands. Madame Tung said, "I wasn't sent by anyone. Chu Lai King, I advise you to let go. In any case, you can't suppress this demon's den. Maybe someone else will be willing to help. It's a matter of my Azure Province. I don't need anyone's help." Although Chu Lai King said so, he couldn't help but sigh with a sense of loss. At that moment, a sharp scream sounded from below as the tadpole demon king violently twisted its body. It was rampaging through the air. His body inflated like a balloon. Countless cracks appeared, and every single one of them let out a blood-curdling screech. With a loud explosion, minced meat and mucus splattered all over the sky. A group of demon kings had just slaughtered their way out of the demon's den. Seeing this, they all dodged. Some of them failed to dodge in time and were drenched. With a hissing sound, white mist rose up, and large swathes of their flesh and blood were corroded away. Even the protection of demon chi was useless. Devour was this tadpole demon king's most terrifying ability. Its body was almost completely composed of this corrosive mucus. Not only could it corrode physical objects, but it could also corrode all kinds of energy. Once one entered its stomach, it was equivalent to entering the gates of hell. Even a demon king would turn into pus. However, Li Qingshan was no regular demon king. If you're bold enough to devour, then so be it. As soon as he entered the tadpole demon king's stomach, he immediately used the force field of earth around himself to push away the surging mucus. Force fields were different from regular techniques and abilities. They were completely unaffected by the corrosion.
the tadpole demon king, was forcefully blown up by the invisible force, dying on the spot. With regards to this result, Chu Lai King and the others were not surprised. It would be inconceivable if Li Qingshan had died inside. Holding a demon king's heart in his hand, Li Qingshan said to Madame Tung, "Otherwise, this will be yours. Forget it, just you wait." Thinking about his relationship with the Banyan Tree King, it was not appropriate to kill his wife. Leaving behind a sentence commonly used by street thugs, Li Qingshan threw the demon king's heart into his mouth and chewed a few times. Then he opened his mouth and spat out a beam of demonic light. At the same time, he shook his head randomly, and the demonic light danced around, forcing the group of demon kings to retreat. In the end, he wiped his charred mouth and said to Chu Lai King, "Fellow Chu, hold on. Your daughter will be here soon." Xianyue, Chu Lai King's spirits rose. If Ji Xianyue was here, this fine demon would not be a threat. Moreover, it would increase their chances of suppressing the devil's Denver. He said coldly, "My surname is not Chu." When Madame Tung heard that little and was coming, she hastened to fight with Chu Lai King. On the other hand, Chu Lai King simply gave up suppressing the devil's den and wanted to fight with her. At the same time, he drove the Red Dragon King and bombarded the devil's den with full power. One by one, the puppet kings flew down from the battleship and joined the battle. Li Qingshan laughed and waved his ending frenzied flower saber at the group of demons. As the saber danced wildly, he transformed into the fighting demon and moved freely in the surging demonic chi. He was not suppressed at all. Instead, his spirit was boosted, and he brought the fighting demon possession to a higher level. With a punch, the demon king flew back. With a turn of the saber, the group of demons retreated. On the great Buddha mountain, the demonic chi soared into the sky, the strength of the chi crisscrossed, and the shadow of a dragon sword. Li Qingshan and the Dragon King of the Sea joined hands to fight the group of demons. The Dragon King of the Sea's body could be big or small, hovering between the real and the illusory. Even if he was chopped into pieces, he wouldn't be affected much. He had an almost immortal body. As for Li Qingshan, his body was strong. He could fight and resist, and he could even be reborn. Therefore, he had no scruples. Even if he was hit a few times, he didn't care at all. Instead, he became more and more courageous as he fought, exchanging injury for injury and life for life. A demon king that looked like an owl pierced through his chest with its claw. He didn't dodge or block, but instead reached out and plucked the demon king's head off. He turned around and used his face to receive a beam of demonic light. As his head was raised backward, the frenzied flower saber flew out of his hand and cut a demon king in half. The frenzied flower saber spun around and returned to his hand. Even the demon kings shivered at such a vicious and violent attack. They had been ordered to attack the 9 provinces, and they could benefit tremendously from it. Once they succeeded, they would receive the favor of the demon domain and receive the assistance of the heavens. However, none of that was as important as their own lives. If they died in battle here, there would be nothing left for them. Even the war demon race was nothing more than that. Half of Li Qingshan's tiger bones were exposed. The banner on his back had been torn down a long time ago, and his face had been struck by a beam of demonic light. He was even more deformed. However, the flames in his eye sockets blazed as battle intent blazed. With his damaged body, he actually gained the upper hand for a moment, which amazed everyone once again. Without his greatest worry, he had already made up his mind to fight to the end and fight to his heart's content. As for the Golden Cicada Spirit King, he had an idea too. A while later, a white figure arrived through the air. Little and swung the Buddha Slayer sword gently, and a demon king immediately went from life to death, reverting to his original form in fear. He said to Li Qingshan, apologetically, "I've made you wait. Good food is never too late. Send your little skeleton to the Clear River Prefecture to provide support. Golden Cicada can't last much longer." Chapter 11:20. Madame Tung's heart trembled. She had been killed by little and saved by little, and naturally she felt that this was different. She had also suffered a sword strike, so she knew how terrifying the Buddha's slaying sword was. "Please leave," Little and said expressionlessly. "Forget it. I don't want to be slashed by you again." Madame Tung sighed and let go of the Qingzhou cauldron reluctantly. Because of the Banyan Tree King, Li Qingshan would not kill her. However, if Little and decided to attack, he would not show mercy, because she wasn't fighting for herself. "Thank you," Little and said. Chu Lai King finally heaved a sigh of relief and regained control of the Qingzhou cauldron. He did not expect his daughter to be so powerful. She forced Madame Tung to retreat with just a few words. He could not help but feel emotional. He cast aside all distracting thoughts and said, "Xianyue, help me suppress the devil's den." "Yes, father." A phoenix cry sounded. Li Qingshan fought to the point of exhaustion, risking his life to take down a demon king with him. In the blink of an eye, he turned into a phoenix, undergoing nerve rebirth. He said to the stunned demon kings, "We're all here, so we can officially begin the battle. Are you prepared to die?" The demon kings retreated and gathered above the devil's denver. Actually, since the beginning of the war, not many demon kings had fallen. The biggest loss was at the beginning. Li Qingshan used the geographical advantage to destroy the devil's den, and the dragon king of the sea killed 7 demon kings. Otherwise, in a row, the enemy of Buddha until now would come there were first still between nearly the enemy 30 of Buddha demon kings and the present. Demon folk. They had the absolute advantage in numbers. She said to Li Qingshan, "If it were not for the fact the army of the demon domain has arrived and the dragon king of the sea were countless auras of life in one had an immortal body, they and the other could be reborn after death. Life in the demon kings would not be willing to fight like a river on the line. Who knew how they would have lost the war long ago surging over and would not have come at the perfect until now. It's up until now, your little skeletons had not been able to kill a single enemy, even though they had the geographical advantage. Li Qingshan army of demon kings, the demon chi is completely annihilated. Their momentum white bone will be suppressed. A great setback. And these demon folk, and they no longer dare to be careless, or they would be able to start a once again gathered their forces. Then and it was extremely rare for them to feel the importance of unity. Quantitative change was enough to induce qualitative change. The
traitorous
soaring locust
disciple
king
had already proven
the
this
unraging
point.
monk
He could put up a
crossed
fight
100
against
kilometers.
several dozen demon
He came to Li
kings,
Qingshan's
but against an
side.
army of millions,
Why did you come
no
back?
amount of demon chi would be
Li
enough.
Qingshan glanced
Gazing at
over.
the sky,
The
Chu Lai
unraging
King was
monk
currently
was not
unleashing
the
the
only
illusion
one
of
who
the
had
Green
returned.
Province again.
The other
Cutting off
3
the
monk
surging
kings
demon
had
chi.
returned
However,
as well.
he definitely
After
would
leading
not
the
be able
monks
to
away
suppress
from the battlefield
demon cavern
and
for
making
a while.
proper arrangements.
The Blood
They
Sea
took the
Banner is
opportunity
pretty
to
useful,
regulate their
and
breathing
I've refined
and
something
rushed
new too.
back to help.
Shaoan
This
blinked
is
her
the
eyes
Chan Monastery
and raised
of
her
Devanaga.
left arm. Watching
Her
over
left
the demon
hand,
suppression
which was
hall
hidden
is
in her
my
sleeve,
responsibility.
held a bell.
Cultivating the
It was
demon
only the
suppression
size of a
statuary
palm,
is precisely
dark blue
to deal
and
with
semi-transparent.
such a situation.
It seemed
Demon
extremely
chi
delicate
surged
in her
around the
white,
unraging
lotus-like
monk,
hand,
but it did not
at a
contain
closer
the
glance,
slightest hint
there were
of
countless
malice.
twisted
Instead,
human faces
it seemed
stacked on top
righteous
of it.
and unassailable.
Then it'll be up to
turning
you.
into a
Li
change of
Qingshan
demon
smiled.
suppression.
He
that
wrapped his
around
arm
him
around
like a
her
dragon.
shoulder
and
he held
kissed
her
seal
forehead
in his left
heavily,
hand,
and
little
a demon
rubbed her
suppressing
forehead
pagoda in his
and
right,
smiled
the demonic
resplendently.
energy surging
All right.
out from the
demon
devil's
folk
cave.
army drew
It
closer
dispersed
and
as
closer.
soon as it arrived
The
beside
aura
him.
they condensed
You do seem
merged
a
with the
little
surging
like you're
demon
about
chi,
to fight.
almost
Li Qingshan
blasting
smiled.
the Green
You
Province
don't
cauldron
say.
away. When I was
Chu
fighting
Lai
and
King
killing,
had to use
you
all
weren't
of his
even here
strength
yet
to keep it under
the
control.
unraging monk
Let
said,
alone suppress the
Abbot,
demon cavern.
little and brought
Just
his palms
now,
together,
the
and
auras
bowed
of several
the
dozen
dauntless
demon
monk.
kings paled
His
in
bearing was
comparison.
dignified,
No matter
and
how
peaceful.
pure they were,
It was impossible
they were
for
not
people to
worth
associate
mentioning.
him with the
Li
two
Qingshan
words
sighed
enemy
inside.
of Buddha.
It was no wonder
One
those
will.
talented
The
other
dauntless
folk
monk's
had
expression
lost
was
divine
mixed.
kingdoms
Originally,
one after
he
another.
wanted to act like
Before such an
he did
army
not see
who
little
would not feel
and
insignificant. However, he was not worried. It was not just because he believed in himself, but also because he believed in her. Little and sensed something and looked back. They looked at each other and smiled. At that moment, it was as if it did not matter if Chu Lai King or the Dragon King of the Sea did not exist. As long as they worked together, they could face all-powerful enemies. Tap, tap, tap. Suddenly, the sound of hooves rang out in the demon cavern. Through the deafening roars and battle cries, it reached everyone's ears clearly. Each beat seemed to strike their hearts, making them sink. Li Qingshan sensed a powerful aura. Both in terms of quality and quantity, it surpassed all the demon kings present. He thought, this is probably the Chu Lai King and the Dragon King of the Sea of the Demon Domain. The Demon Domain is so vast, so they can't all be ordinary. Though, why does this aura seem rather familiar? Nay, with the neighing of a horse, a black-armored knight emerged from the demon cavern. A man and a horse stood before the entire army arriving in this world. Behind them was the roaring demon folk army, but there was not a single person beside them. I see. Li Qingshan immediately understood where the sense of familiarity came from. The banner on the knight's back was written with the words "Fighting Demons." What a bunch of trash! The black-armored knight roared at the demon kings, and the warhorse beneath him also revealed a look of contempt. How much better can you be? This was a retort, but it did not come from a demon king. Li Qingshan stood with his arms crossed and gazed at the knight in interest. You're a fighting demon? fighting Demon Hun. The knight stated his name. You're Li Qingshan? You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.